Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Southdown National Park Authority's Planning Committee. My name is Heather Baker, and I'm the chairman of the committee. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting. It's a meeting held in public. The purpose of the meeting is for the committee members to listen to the officers' presentations and the public speakers before debating the issues and coming to a decision on the items on today's agenda. Can I remind you all that members of the SDNPA have a primary responsibility for ensuring that the authority furthers the national park purposes and duty. Members regard themselves first and foremost as members of the authority and will act in the best interests of the authority and of the park, rather than as delegates representing the interests of their appointing authority or indeed any other interest groups. During this meeting, you may see members using their tablets or phones. Please be assured that this is to review background information, such as the local plan, maps or plans of the applications under consideration, or other associated planning documents. Or in my case, adjusting my hearing aids if I can't hear what's going on. To minimise the disruption, please can I ask you to switch your mobile phones off, or at least to silent. Thank you. I also need to remind members and officers to speak clearly into the microphone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Can you all hear me? Good. That's a good start, isn't it? Don't bring the microphone too close for anybody who is tempted to do that, because it simply makes an awful noise. Okay, so we can move now to the agenda before us. And just before we start, I'd like to welcome Tom Neville, who is a new member who's come to us from Eastbourne Borough Council. So welcome, Tom. This is your first planning meeting, but not your first planning meeting in the world, just here. Good. Welcome. I'm sure you'll have a hugely good time. So let's go on to apologies for absence. We have an apology from Stephen McAuliffe. Everybody else thinks here. Full house, that's good, apart from Stephen. So declarations of interest. I think Gary and then Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's on item 8. I know one of the speakers interacted within my ward and district, so it's just a personal interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Yes, thank you. With reference to agenda item 6, I would like to first declare a public service interest as a member of Harting Parish Council, and the application site is within Harting Parish. Yep. Secondly, I'd like to declare a personal interest with reference to the fact that a relative owns a similar site some distance away, but I have been informed that it is not a prejudicial interest. I declared the fact to the monitoring officer of the authority. Thirdly, I know two of the public speakers, that is Councillor Bramley, who is a parish councillor for Harting, and also, but not so well, I've met Mr. Ashby Rudd.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else? Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I have to declare a public service interest in respect of items 7 and 8 as a Lewis District Councillor.
Thank you.
And I also know two of the speakers in respect of item 7 and all three of the speakers in respect of item 7 and 2 in respect of item 8. Right.
Thank you very much. So although we have a number of people with interests, nobody is required to leave the room, and everybody can continue to be involved in the process and the voting. Thank you. So, minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 13th of November. I believe those minutes are satisfactory, and we'll all have seen them. Has anybody any comments to make? If not, I will sign those at the end of this meeting. So now we're on updates from previous committee meetings, and Tim is going to take us through the 3 items there.
Thank you, Chair. Members, update on a few items. You might recall resolving to grant permission for 16 dwellings at Findon, one of the allocated sites. I'm pleased to say we've now concluded the negotiations, the Section 106, for all the issues you wanted covered, and the decision was issued on the 5th of December. So that's out. Less good news, perhaps. Ditchling Rugby Club, you might remember, 18 months ago perhaps now, we visited there for changes to the rugby club, changes to the landscape, a small groundsman store facilities. which we refused. It went to appeal, and the appeal has been allowed. As you know, generally, we have quite a good appeal record, around 78, 80%. So we're looking at this to see if there's any lessons we can learn and or go back to the inspectorate with to ensure that they really do understand the importance of the sensitive landscape just when you're down from the downs on the scarp slope. So that's 2 updates. And then another one, which is perhaps a bit more complicated. You might recall, very rarely, we brought a certificate of lawfulness here to be discussed around Edburton and the Springs. Yeah. And as you all are aware, certificates of lawfulness are normally matters of law, as my colleague will always advise, and the planning merits don't come into it. This was for around 10 pitches for a period of time that's allowed under the General Permitted Development Order. But it also came into conflict with water neutrality, which is covered under the habitat regulations. You've heard me say many times, please do not mix and match legislations and leave it to the other legislations if that's appropriate. But in this case, because it failed the habitat regs, we could not issue the certificate of lawfulness, so the certificate of lawfulness was refused. The reason it failed the habitat regs was because of water neutrality. Hey-ho, water neutrality, as you're aware, has now been lifted because there's been a solution to the issue. So the applicant came back and under the General Permitted Development Order said, I would like to now continue. Please can you approve the details of the toilet arrangements and a couple of other minor bits that one has to do under the prior approval. I hope this all makes sense. The reason I'm saying this in public is because it's quite confusing for the public, and I do apologise for that, but effectively, having made a decision to refuse something 3 or 4 months ago, the situation's changed, and now under law we have no right other than to enable it. And that I recognise has caused some confusion in the local community. We have written to you on this, but I just thought it was worth going over this for yourselves here. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. That's all very helpful. Does anybody have anything they'd like to question or comment on? No? Okay, thank you very much. I don't believe we have any urgent items, so we can move straight on to development management. So the first application in front of us is Clarefield Copse, Dumford Lane, Nywood, and Richard Ferguson is going to take us through this application, the report. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Before I start my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the update sheet. I don't intend to go through all of the information there. It's reasonably self-explanatory, but of course, if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So my presentation is intending to introduce the site and the proposals themselves. As you would have read in the report, there is a degree of background to this site insofar as temporary permission was granted by the committee in 2021. And prior to that, and even a bit beyond the temporary consent, the campsite is operated under PD rights. What's now proposed is a permanent seasonal campsite, and I'll come on to those details in a moment. And then in terms of the main considerations, the report considers the principle of development, the landscape concerns and impacts on surrounding amenities, and that's what the presentation will focus on. The planning history, obviously there's been, as you will have read, a number of enforcement issues on this site, as well as discharging planning conditions and the like. That, of course, is acknowledged. It's acknowledged in my presentation as well as in the report itself. And just to note to members, there are unsupportive consultees in regard to landscape and Harting Parish Council who are here to speak this morning. And the key development plan policies in relation to the proposals are there listed and are cited in the report as well. So the application site, as you can see in red here, is approximately sort of 8 hectares. Roughly 7 hectares of that is field. We have Clarefield Copse, which is an ancient woodland, just on the northern edge of the site. The site is accessed via Dumford Lane, and the access, as we will call on the site visit, is here, and you travel down into a car parking area here that is on higher ground to the rest of the site, which slopes in a a gentle slope, sort of a north-south direction. Also along the access and along the access track on the western edge, there's a public right-of-way, and that's also part of the Serpents Trail. We also have Tygles Farm on the eastern side, roughly about 95 metres away from the site boundary. And then we have other neighbouring properties here to the west, which is much further, I think around the 300-metre mark. I thought it was important to show members these aerials. One is around the time of the campsite use, I think from 2024, I believe, and you can see some evidence of that use. And then at a later period, you can see how the site has been recovering. And indeed, on our site visit, that campsite use perhaps wasn't, not readily apparent as you might have seen it during the camping or at the end of the camping season here. Just to run through photos, this is the car parking area and the stockman's dwelling and barn on that northern edge with Clearfield Copse woodland behind. This is the access track. And then through here is where the proposed track is, or would be, for the amenity hut, which would be located here. This is the track along the western site boundary and is the public right-of-way. I believe there was previously hedgerow along this field, and there has been a degree of widening here. You can see the fence there, but otherwise the public right-of-way remains unaffected through here. And we have a couple of panoramics for the site. So this is taken from the car park here, looking across. So that's the western edge. And then you have the southern boundary. And I think the other thing to note is you do get a good appreciation of the downs in the wider landscape from this site, whether it's here or along its northern edges further round here. And then this photo is taken from the southwest corner, looking across that southern portion of the site towards the eastern boundary. So this plan just shows the site in its slightly wider context. The applicant, I believe, owns the ponds here, and I believe also owns the fields on this plan here. Moving closer into what's proposed. So the campsite is proposed to operate between the 1st of May and the 31st of October. It would comprise of 18 pitches, and you can see those identified by the squares on the plan. The existing access would be utilised and the parking area retained. You may see that parking spaces are delineated there. That's not intending to be the case on site. It's merely to show car park capacity, and it equates to one parking space per pitch. Here we have the proposed track that we saw a photo a moment ago of where that's proposed. That would be about 50 metres long, and the width of that has been reduced through the course of the application by 1 metre to 3 metres. We have the amenity building, which I have some plans for in a moment here. Each pitch would be limited to 6 persons rather than specifically the number of tents. So you might ordinarily perhaps have a family where parents and children might have different tents, for example, or friends. And the campsite management plan before us at the moment reflects that, but also restricts large groups and restricts camper vans and caravans on site. So it would just be for tents. It's also quite a low density with a 7-hectare site with 18 pitches. None of the pitches would have water and electricity either. They would all be served by the amenity block. So the amenity block itself is generally a modest building, just over 6 metres by 4 metres wide and just under 3 metres high. It would be clad in timber with a sheet metal roof, and there would be a couple of roof lights serving it You can see the dotted rectangles there on the plan. These would be the only toilet and shower facilities for campers, and it's generally in the same location as the existing field shelter that's about here. It's also considered to be the minimum facilities required for the scale of campsite. The waste from it would be through storage tanks below it, and they would be emptied on a 2-weekly basis, I believe. In regard to the overall main considerations, I've broken that down into principal, landscape, surrounding amenities, and then the overall planning balance. I think when it comes to the principle, the previous application was proposed under some justification as agricultural farm diversification. I think that's should be given less weight now, considering there's been changes in regard to the applicant's ownership of land and moving agricultural, focusing agriculture business outside of the park. But nonetheless, the proposals, in officers' view, accord with the tourism policy on its own merits, and that's where we've primarily focused on. In regard to the planning history, yes, of course, have an eye to it. It is a material consideration, and we did previously grant temporary permission, and that temporary permission was effectively to assess the impact of development on landscape, neighbour amenity, and any other environmental issues that might have arisen. And also, of course, it was an opportunity for the applicant to demonstrate it could be operated as envisaged. Clearly, there have been issues, and these are acknowledged within the report, particularly at the start of the main assessment, but it's considered that they're not so surmountable that it would justify reasons for refusal, given the considerations of impacts and recommended conditions. And the planning application needs to be judged against the local plan unless there are sufficient material considerations that would reach a different decision, and the proposals are deemed to be acceptable within the local plan policies, subject to the suite of conditions before you. Turning to landscape, the site is within a prevailing agricultural landscape, and of course it is quite a tranquil location. In our tranquility study, it's at that medium sort of sensitivity, and indeed when I've been on site a number of times, you don't get much road noise and the like, and that in itself attracts people to the site for camping. But its characteristics largely remain unchanged, really, from the seasonal campsite use. From what I've seen on site, the field does recover with no stark evidence of that campsite use, after which it is proposed to return to that sort of baseline agricultural use with some horse grazing. I think there's been some polo ponies, as well as taking a hay crop. But I think overall, that's a product of the low-density nature of the 18 pitches in regard to the intensity on the site. The existing access would be utilised as well, so that has been there for many years, so there's not intending to be any further hard standing. And in terms of dark night skies and landscape, really the only permanent lighting would be at the amenity block, and it's intended that that be sensor controlled and kept to a minimum. In terms of impacts on surrounding amenities, we're very conscious that there have been complaints, and they relate to planning matters as well as environmental health. So in terms of environmental health, discussing with Chichester's environmental health team, I think there have been 2 complaints in 2022, 21, and there's been, I think, about 4 or 5 enforcement complaints between sort of 2020, 21, up until 23, I think, 24. Obviously, there's been a campsite management plan where there has been attempts to restrict or noise and disturbance, but as I say, there have been some issues around adherence to that. And there's no amenity impact on the public right-of-way in officers' views. In terms of the overall planning balance, we've obviously weighed up the landscape impacts, and there are some ecological and landscape enhancements proposed, as well as the economic benefits in terms of income to the local area, although albeit that is difficult to quantify, but there are pubs around the surrounding area, for instance. And there's a social aspect in terms of bringing people to the national park to experience it and to accord with purpose too. And overall, we think those benefits outweigh any disbenefits. So to conclude, it is recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions in paragraph 9.1 of the report and any amendments, and the update sheet, and any amendments or conditions required to address technical matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. I just point members towards the last item on the update sheet, which is about the management plan, which does say that the management plan should be submitted to us prior to the campsite being brought into use, which I think is important to note for us all. So let's go now to our members of the public, and we have the first speaker against this application is Councillor Sheila Bramley, representing Harting Parish Council.
Yes, I can't. I need to move out of the sun. Can you go here? Sorry, that's best. Thank you. Good morning. Members of the Planning Committee may remember meeting in Lewes in 2021 when the previous application was considered. And at that meeting, evidence was heard of the many concerns of local residents about the operation of the campsite under permitted development regulations, and the temporary permission was granted on the basis that this would enable conditions to be imposed to regulate the running of the site, which was thought to be a better idea. During the temporary period, the applicant would be able to show that the site could be run as promised. In the event, the conditions, including some relating to the commencement of the operation, were not discharged until September 2023. And so at the very well-attended October Parish Council meeting, the unanimous public view was that the conditions relating to supervision of the site had not been observed, and evidence was given of the many local problems that had been experienced throughout the temporary permission period. It's notable that the public support for the site comes largely from the Emsworth area, where the applicant now exclusively farms, while opposition is centred wholly around local area among people who actually experience the effects of the site. Evidence from the applicant relating to compliance with the campsite management plan is strongly disputed by neighbours. It's notable that the recommendation suggests the imposition of yet more conditions difficult to enforce. It's on the basis of the strength of local opposition that the Parish Council objects to this application, and we do not accept at 4.8 the officers note that previous management issues are separate, because the temporary permission was wholly in order to demonstrate that the conditions could be enforced, and in our opinion they have not been. So also the council is concerned about clear breaches of planning regulations such as removal of a hedge, extension of paved paths and building of the permanent amenity hut. Further, the site ran in 2024 after the end of the permission period without compliance with any permitted development rules or other conditions. The temporary permission has not shown that the site can run in accordance with the conditions, and on this basis we believe it would be preferable for the land to retain its agricultural status and for any future operation to be managed under permitted development rights as it can be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Simon Ashby-Rudd, representing Craig Hendricks and Dumpford Park Farm Partnership.
I've been asked to speak on behalf of two people, and then I've been asked to speak for myself. So I will run the whole lot in one go, if you don't mind. Is that...
I guess that's, no, can't be done. No, because you've got 3 minutes for each section. So you need to run the 3 minutes, as I've just described, for Craig Hendricks and Dumford Farm,
Sure.
and then your own 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've been asked to speak for the local community representing Derek Balls, a local farmer, Craig Hendricks and myself, all direct neighbours of the site. We have had to put up with the sleepless nights of this campsite for 8 years and had to deal with the numerous antisocial activities and social and planning breaches at the site that the enforcement team is well aware of, so we speak from experience. Speaking on behalf of Mr. Balls, dear committee members, I have lived and farmed this area for over 40 years and have seen the area develop. Our farm borders the campsite, and every summer we have to live with the excessive noise troubling our livestock, damaging our fencing and woodlands, littering, and even trespassing from guests of the site. On a number of occasions, these trespassers have been aggressive and rude, which is something nobody should live with. On a practical note, the site is busiest in July and August when we are harvesting. Dumford Lane is a single-track lane, so any additional traffic is significantly disruptive, especially when drivers are unfamiliar with how to drive in the country. I would add, from my experience, that land holding of only 30 hectares of pasture is not economically farmable in isolation, so it does not surprise me the owner wants to develop the site. I remember this site 25 years ago when it was open fields. Today it has an industrial unit, a house, hardcore paving, a 50-car car park, and multiple unauthorized sheds and accommodation huts. These have all been built by the applicant, with or without the appropriate permissions. The history of this site is that it will be developed and it will not stop here. Speaking on behalf of Mr. Hendricks, 8 years of operations and numerous promises and nothing has changed. Traffic is worse, rubbish is worse, noise is worse, with no enforcement to stop it. This is not the peaceful wild camping development the applicant wishes to portray. Its physical location away from public transport and shops, and even its layout, means it is frequented not by walkers and cyclists, but by motorists and groups in commercial van. The applicant himself admits that he has ignored the conditions of operation and allowed large pitches and car access, which fundamentally influences the character of the site. This is the 4th attempt to get planning permission for a campsite, and all previous applications have failed because camping here does have a materially negative impact. I have no confidence that the plans presented or any conditions imposed are executable or even will be implemented. Experience suggests they will simply be ignored and things will only get worse. I ask the committee to be carefully consider the past performance of this site, not the fairy tale being portrayed when considering it, and hope this will enable you to reject the application.
Thank you. So that's your first 3 minutes, and
That's
now
my
you're going
first.
to speak for yourself.
Sorry, I had to get through that quite quickly. Okay.
Yes, but you did it well because we were within the 3 minutes.
Okay, so start again.
Yep.
And now speaking for myself. The role of the park is to protect the landscape while promoting access to the park and supporting the local community. I suggest this application does none of the above. Camping at the site does not operate as promised and does negatively impact the landscape. There is need for camping capacity, but I suggest this is already available. Today, there are at least 49 campsites within 10 miles of this site. And finally, the site is simply not supported by the local community, as it provides no employment, no amenities, and no economic boost to the area. The continuous development of the site is clear to all. A commitment for no further development was a key condition of the temporary permission granted in 2021. But still, the applicant tried to build another unnecessary barn last year on the site, which was thankfully refused. The change of use of this site is the next step. This is portrayed as diversification, but in reality, it's progressive urbanization of this landscape. The fact is, the change of use requested in this application is no longer even necessary for the applicant to run the wild campsite he suggests. Since last year, he can apply for Class BC permitted development rights permission, which allows a temporary campsite to run throughout the summer. The applicant should have applied for it this season, but chose not to, and again ignore planning requirements. Within 10 miles of this site, 9 operations have applied for permission to operate a wild camping site next season. All these applications, except this one, have applied under Class BC application permission. I suggest keeping the current designation and requiring the applicant to apply under Class BC permission both protects the landscape, protects the local community, and enables authorities to monitor the site effectively and control it, while allowing the applicant to do only what he says he wants to do, which is run a wild campsite. Committee members, I put it to you, this application is not only unworkable and undesirable, it creates material future risk that can be avoided. Retaining the agricultural land use designation of this landscape provides it with the greatest protection, and so why remove it when it is unnecessary to do so? For this reason, plus the numerous other reasons already outlined, this application should be rejected.
Thank you very much. We now have two speakers in support of this application. The first is Angus Sprackling, who is the applicant.
Hello, I am Angus Sprackling, owner of the campsite and fourth generation local farmer. My family have been working and farming in the South Downs since at least the 19th century, and although our main farming enterprise is now based in Emsworth, a permanent campsite will provide much needed income to support the agricultural business, and as farmers we have all the tools to manage a really good campsite. Camping is a great British pastime and I feel proud to facilitate it. Hardy, nature-loving people turning up at my site, pitching a tent, and enjoying the countryside. I run a simple site with few bells and whistles, just a space to pitch a tent, toilet, and a shower. The site is in an old grass meadow surrounded by oak trees with a trickling stream and sounds of owls, woodpeckers, and swallows overhead. I supply the space and a watchful eye of me and my warden. The visitors supply the rest. This could be watching the sunrise, looking at the stars, walking the South Downs and going to the local pubs, visiting a local historic town, or having a barbecue and letting the kids play in nature. To me, this sounds like bliss and is an experience everyone should have, whether they are rich or poor. I will admit that when running under temporary permission, some technical breaches occurred. I felt the investment to achieve some elements of the permission were not possible due to the nature of the consent. I also allowed some flexibility in response to feedback from visiting families with more than one tent pitch, which is now supported in this application. With a permanent permission, I am wholeheartedly committed to meeting all planning requirements and investing the money this will require. I believe the investment in a proper toilet and shower block and additional planting will greatly improve the campsite and its popularity. The extra revenue will then be invested in additional and locally appropriate hedging, trees, and ponds, far beyond the requirements of the BNG. I want to run one of the best and most beautiful back-to-basics campsites in the UK, and with over 200 positive reviews for the site, I'm well on my way to achieving this. I love nature, farming, and the countryside. I want to continue to work and share this with others. My dream is for a campsite that is a wildlife hub, a place where people can stay and enjoy a wildlife-rich, traditionally farmed landscape that is in my blood. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will please support my application today.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker is Kai Penny, who is the planning agent speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, members. I'm the planning agent from Whaleback, speaking in support of the application. You've just heard from the passionate owner that elements of the temporary permission were not fully complied with and the reasons why. Your enforcement officers and environmental health officers did investigate, but no further action was taken at the time, as it was concluded that it was not in the public interest to do so. The clear implication is that the technical breaches at the time did not result in harm to landscape character nor neighbouring amenity. And those issues are now addressed in this application to resolve matters, such as the added flexibility for more than one tent per pitch and the use of vehicles to unload and load at each pitch. This application for a permanent permission also provides the authority with greater control over the future operation of the campsite. through a strengthened campsite management plan, additional enforceable conditions, and the statutory responsibilities that come with biodiversity net gain. The proposal will deliver clear tourism benefits to the national park, and the continued operation of the campsite will allow the applicant to build on positive guest feedback, as posted in online reviews, and the letters submitted in support of the application. The campsite will be modest in scale, capped at 18 pitches, and the new amenity hut and access track represent minor interventions that are appropriate to the site and not widely visible within the surrounding landscape. The campsite will continue to be low-key and well-managed, with clear limits on guest numbers, seasonality, and site layout. The applicant has worked with officers to amend the proposed site plan and move pitches away from the nearest neighbouring properties towards the east, helping to further mitigate against any potential impacts on neighbouring amenity. The scheme will deliver enhanced planting and a 13% biodiversity net gain, secured through a habitat management and monitoring plan. There is also direct access to the Serpents Trail, as you've heard, providing visitors with walking opportunities to local businesses, public houses, and into the wider South Downs landscape. Crucially, if members are minded to grant planning permission today, we as agents will work closely with the planning department and the applicant so that all planning conditions are fully complied with going forwards. In summary, past breaches are acknowledged with regret, but this application presents an opportunity to secure a controlled, policy-compliant form of rural tourism with stronger management controls and longer-term benefits for the national park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the public input to this application. So members, it's now down to you. We've got a lot of people want to speak. John. It's the speakers, public. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask for some clarification? Mr. Ashby-Rudd raised the issue of use class and an alternative use class rather than that that's in the application. Can somebody explain that to me, please?
Fine. Good. It is.
Of what
Absolutely. That's what we're going to...
is possible without a planning
Yeah,
commission.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Richard. Okay. Richard.
That's in relation to permitted development rights to use land as a campsite. I think as part of that PD right, you need to serve notification on the local planning authority, whether it's us or others, it's national regs, and provide some details, but otherwise it's relating to permitted development rights for 56 days of the year.
I suspect you're coming back.
I am, actually. So it is possible to have this use as a permitted use for that 56-day period without seeking planning consent?
That's correct. And also, just to assist members for context, the 56 days under permitted development rights is about a third of the time that this permanent, so I worked it out about 180 days for May to October. So you're looking around a third of the time.
Thank you. John.
Richard, thank you. That's helpful.
Has that... hang on a sec. Has that satisfied, Alan, what you were going to ask? Because you appear to have the same concern.
Yes, if that is the only difference, my question was really trying to explore what in reality is the difference that would be achieved for, as it were, for the applicants by granting this permission compared with the PD rights permission, and is it only the longer period, as it were?
I think Richard's answered that, has he? Yep. Yes, Tim, go ahead.
I'm commenting, but I also thank Rob, who's got the PD rights up in front of him. But effectively, you're allowed up to 60 pitches for up to, 50, let's get it right, 50 pitches for, I think it's how many weeks? 60 days. That's 50 pitches for 60 days, permitted development, and any movable structures reasonably necessary. So to answer the question about kit, the kit that's being proposed here would not fall under permitted development rights. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Robert.
So on the same subject, would the track fall under PD, or does he need planning permission for the track going into the new building?
Richard?
No, that wouldn't be permitted development. That's operational engineering development.
Okay.
Even on farmland?
Well, yes, this wouldn't be for the purposes of agriculture. It's for the purposes of the campsite.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to go slightly, because thanks for the questions and thanks for the answer.
Are you coming on to another topic?
I'm coming
now?
on for another topic.
Just before you start, are we sure that we've cleared and are satisfied with those answers? It looks like two people are not. So can we come to you in a moment, Gary, please? Paul?
My understanding is that under PD rights, the requirements of the landowner to demonstrate to the planning authority about waste and management they're quite minimal compared to the sorts of conditions we're able to place on the applicant by giving it permission like this.
Yes.
That's quite significant.
Yes. Andrew, I mean.
I've got another piece of clarification. Richard Ferguson, in describing the site to us, and indeed it's in front of us, states that it's going to be open from the 1st of May to 31st of October, yet condition 3 states that it's from the 1st of May to the 30th of September. I was obviously wanting clarification, which it is.
Thank you.
Apologies, that's obviously me. Yes, I believe it's for October.
To October.
It is the 31st of October, not as in per condition.
No. Okay. So we need to update that. Gary. Richard, can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have real concerns. I mean, the landscape officer has objected, but I think Richard's covered that off in the report. I mean, to me, it's condition 5, and it's, as you mentioned, it's the last paragraph in the update sheet.
Yes.
And I think this is the crux of the matter, which I think the residents around that area need to understand for us to tell them, or we don't agree to it. And it's this management plan that that has got to be done in before we come in. Now, obviously, that'll be subject to Richard and the officers working this out. But my concerns are the detailed noise control management measures. Now, we've had these in the past where we've actually put on the conditions, no amplified music. And I'm thinking of the one we did east of Ditchland, there, where they said you can only have acoustic, you're not allowed to have electric. So I really do think that's got to be the big one. Going down to the next one, this detail of the warding on-site management. And I think, again, the speaker in support, the owner of the land, admitted that they had made mistakes and they were technical breaches. I think the technical breaches could be the fact that there's nobody on site to stop some of this behaviour, which is the first speaker who was against it. Sorry, the second speaker, Mr. Ashby Rudd.
Yes.
Because there's no control on that site. They're left to their own thing. The clue's in the name, wild, and people do take it a little bit to the excess. And again, it's the measures to address the antisocial behaviour. Unless you've got somebody on site permanently, you're not being able to do that. Kids are kids. We were all kids once, and I can assure you I probably went further than I should have done growing up. I'm quite happy with the next two. It's the management of the fire pits and fuel use and on-site. Again, it says on-site safety precautions. They need to have somebody there all the time, 24/7. And the last one is the complaints procedure. There should be a means for the local residents around this site to be able to feed into the site manager that there is problems. If they don't take this seriously, then we will continually have to send out enforcement officers the whole time. That, unless I can get some satisfaction, I won't be supporting this application, because that's the basis of why people were complaining from the parish council and beyond, because they just ran a riot on that site. And I can't support something like that, especially, we've all visited it. We know how beautiful that site and quiet it is. But obviously, when you've got 18 pitches, now we said we can have more than one tent per pitch. You could potentially have your 60 without you knowing it. So I'm afraid, unless they can guarantee to the officer, I won't be able to support this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Gary. I think Janet was next.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you want me to do all my comments in one go, or question first? Well, my first comment was a question, which was, we were told there's enough car parking spaces, one for each plot, so to speak, or pitch, I suppose I should call them. Now we're told that there's the pitches are big enough for 2 tents, whatever. And probably 6 people. Now, I don't know how you get all those people, say half a dozen of them turned up with 6 people. You surely haven't got enough car parking spaces. Hey-ho, I don't know, I'm not the expert, but that's how it looks to me from there. I think it's got a wonderful aspect for people that want to come, and I'm all for people enjoying the countryside. The only way you'll get them to know how to use it properly is by letting them in. However, it has got to be done properly, and in my opinion, respect the local people that live there as well. So I just really wanted some clarification on how we're going to fit all these cars into the spaces that are 1 for 18 tents, when 2 tents, whatever they are called, turn up. Wanted. So that was all I really wanted, some clarification, Chairman.
Thank you.
Not over happy at the minute.
Just to extend your request for clarification, there was mention of 50 car parking spaces from one of the members of the public. So there's lack of understanding here. We've got 18 pitches. You're talking about 6 people per pitch, possibly. That's how many cars per pitch are we assessing? Because there are an awful lot of car parking spaces on that drawing, if that's correct. So can we have a bit of clarity about the number of people on the number of pitches, the number of tents that are allowed, and the number of parking spaces, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So the plan before you shows the parking spaces delineated here. Adding them all up comes to, there's 40 spaces there, of which, what the application contends is that there would be 1 space per pitch. That's how
that's 18.
That's what 1 car parking space, yes. The angling club do actually still use this car parking area for the ponds, I would like to highlight. But otherwise, there is quite a lot of capacity in that particular parking area. In terms of tents themselves, what the applicant has provided in writing back in November is that yes, they would like to see a limit of 6 people per pitch, of which that would be 2 to 3 tents maximum.
3 tents maximum, then?
Yes.
Andrew's next, and then Antonia.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's already been stated by many people that campsites like this should be encouraged where they can be properly managed and are in the right place. But with reference to the management, which has been quite a lot of talk about, many of the landscape officers' objections, and the landscape officers' objections still stand, relate to non-compliance with the 2021 permission, which was set to monitor the site, and the impacts of non-compliance. But however, we have already heard that non-compliance, as is stated in paragraph 7.3 of the report, was not expedient to address in the public interest or significantly material to pursue. Well, we've heard that quite a lot of members of the public effectively think it is expedient. It should have been expedient to have done it. Slightly sort of going over things which have already been said, but to put the matters in context, permission was granted by this committee on the 1st of June 2021, and 6 conditions were not discharged until the 23rd of September 2023. That's over 2 years later, and nearly two of the 3 years of the application had already passed by then. So for much of the permitted period, which expired in October 2024, and for the whole of 2025, which is, of course, this year, the site has been operating without full compliance with the permission given. To sort of move on, are 2 toilets adequate? Because we've already talked about the fact there are 18 pitches with up to 6 people per pitch, potentially using several tents, which could lead to more than 100 people being on site. Well, if I lived in a house with only 2 toilets, I would be, it would be a very difficult position. However, also, I was going to note that with regard to toilets, they produce wastewater. Nowhere in the agenda, the website or discharge of the 3-year temporary permission conditions is there mention of the size of the septic tank, which is effectively there for these. In operational terms, and regarding my last comment, that's rather an important detail. As the site will be open for more than 60 days in a calendar year, if planning permission is granted, it is a legal requirement that a campsite license is applied for to Chichester District Council as the authority who deal with these under the Public Health Act 1936. It appears that amongst other requirements of such a license, it is likely to specify at least 2 dedicated women's toilets and 2 hand basins, at least 1 dedicated male toilet and a urinal, and 2 hand basins for men. Separate shower facilities will also be required, and there will be other issues which will have to be addressed. At this stage, we don't know all the requirements, but there would appear to be insufficient space in the amenity building to house these. So it would obviously change the nature of the site if they were compliant with permission. I see lots of head tossing. I've looked into this quite carefully, and it does appear that there is this requirement to make this, although there, of course, there hasn't been a, this has not had a license as far as I'm aware up until now. Further to what I've just said, the site, we have heard, has had a lot of adverse impacts on a number of people. Teigel's farm adjacent to it, other neighbours, and the neighbouring farmer. I don't know if anybody's read his comments on the website. They're fairly graphic. He states, and we have heard, that people are walking their pets on his ground, and campers are using them and the Serpent's Way as a lavatory. In short, should a diversification benefit one landowner at such a detrimental impact on the neighbouring one?
Thank you. Antonia.
Yes, I was initially quite sympathetic to this on the basis of the purpose to encouragement of enjoyment of the special qualities of the national park, and camping fitted in with that very well. But the history of admitted breaches is concerning, and also the scale of the adverse impacts. So I think it could come to the conditions. And looking at the management plan, it seems quite vague. Can we come up with a much more precise a condition on noise control, to Gary's point, because that's important. That's a particularly important impact. Can we mandate an on-site warden as part of the plan? Could we further limit the number of days, because this is a very big increase to 180 days from the 60 days that will be possible under permitted development? And the toilet question that Andrew's just raised, potentially we've got 18 pitches with up to 6 people, that's 108 people. Could we limit, in addition, have an internal limit that would keep the number of people to, say, 60? Because the alternative is to have a much larger toilet block, which will then increase the impact on the landscape.
Thank you. Quite a few questions there. Before we come to answer them, are there any more questions that people want to bring ahead? Daniel?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just wanted to ask for clarity on this statement that made in the report that previous management issues are separate. Is that a matter of legal fact, or because it seems to me that in this particular context, where we issued a temporary permission precisely on the basis that we should see how well it works, that it's quite surprising then that if we knew at the time that that experience would not be allowed to be taken into account, then issuing of the temporary license in the first place, permission in the first place, was slightly pointless. And in that context, am I correct in understanding that one of the conditions of the temporary permission was that the amenity building should be removed after the end of the season? And because the fact that it wasn't seems a remarkably sort of blatant failure to comply with those rules, which I think stands above many of the others. So yeah, that was really my.
Okay, I think perhaps Richard, would you take that question first, or that clarification first, and then we'll go to Antonia's points, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what we're trying to get across there is to differentiate between what's a planning enforcement matter and what's a planning matter. So, as I said in my presentation, yes, of course, the planning history is a material relevant consideration, and it's up to members what weight they give to that. But I'm just trying to differentiate between, yes, you have a suite of conditions, and any lack of adherence to those at a later stage would be a separate matter around planning enforcement.
Yes, okay.
Just to confirm, so you're not telling us we have to ignore that previous experience?
No. No, indeed.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. So let's now go to Antonia's points, please. Oh, and
I do have something which is effectively another question.
Okay. Add it in. Yeah.
So against the background that obviously we're a national park with the highest level of landscape protection, and that raises landscape issues and so forth, and knowing that we do sometimes permit camping type developments in that landscape nevertheless, but against the background of the importance of the national park landscape, the importance of not causing amenity difficulties and problems for the surrounding residents and whatnot, what I'm having trouble with, and I feel really uneasy about this, and that's why I'm putting it in the form of a question, is whether we can have any assistance on the question which is in my mind, is in what respect is the position better, if any, is the position better in terms of protection of the landscape and protection of the amenities and of the surrounding people, whether they're businesses like the farmers or people living there? In what respect is the position under the suggested permission better or worse or preferable to the situation which is allowable under the PD rights regime, which you've had explained to us? Because I'm needing to feel that there is something better about what, in order to be persuaded that the permission ought to be granted, because otherwise, against the background of the breaches and the history and so forth, I'd be taking the view, well, it hasn't been very good, has it? And so unless there's something better about the situation produced by the granting of the permanent permission with management plans, conditions and so forth, I'd be reluctant to go for the granting of permission, but I'd like to understand what that is. And at the moment, I'm not clear.
Richard.
Tim may want to come in as well, but the fallback position is permitted development, and as we've heard, that can be up to 50 pitches. So that present position would be, if that were to occur, a shorter but more intense period of camping versus what's before you, which is a longer period of time, but with 18 pitches as a comparison. So it's either that perhaps shorter, intense period versus a more longer seasonal, low-density period.
Okay, Tim.
I think I'd add to that, and it perhaps goes to the heart of Alan's question. You've got a series of conditions in front of you, and you're having a discussion about how enforceable they are, quite frankly. And you've got B and G. You've heard biodiversity net gain would be, quite considerable. And we're here for conserving and enhancing the natural beauty and all the rest of it, wildlife and cultural heritage. So the conditions plus B and G, to our mind, are quite important factors that you would not have that level of control or gain if it was just handed over to the PD rights, where, from memory, and I might get the note, the only things they've got to come to us with is around toilet arrangements and waste disposal. And that goes back to the Ed Burton case and the certificate of lawfulness I referred to earlier, and whether a structure is movable or not. And that's a whole other can of worms. So I hope that answers the question, that there's quite a lot of advantage with the controls and the gain from biodiversity net gain, but you need to consider whether you have faith in those controls and whether it's been either proven enough or that you have confidence in these new strengthened conditions and management plans enough to give permission.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just, while I
Yes,
said there was a
yes.
couple of other points I want to say, lots of interesting discussion about other legislation and how it might cross over on this, but as you often hear us say, you need to look at the application as presented before you. And that goes to the same point about all sorts of interesting discussions on how you could change things, and whether there should be a permanent manager on site. To answer that directly, that's not within your gift. You have to look at this, and there's been no suggestion of a permanent manager on site. So unless I'm advised otherwise, you need to consider this on the merits of the application put before you.
Okay, thank you. Robert, I haven't forgotten you, Antonio. We will come back to those points. Robert.
Tim, can I follow that up? Because I think that's the crux of the discussion about whether giving permanent permission gives the enforcement team any more powers than they have under PD. So going through that process of having a management plan which is agreed, are they better able to enforce that than without that plan? Because if it makes no difference, why are we giving permanent permission? If it makes a difference, then there's a real benefit to the residents of having better enforcement, because that's what we think it's going to come down to. So I fully understand your comment, it's not a planning issue, but that's the key issue we've got to make our minds up on. So I need some advice about, does planning enforcement, is it better with a permanent permission with a clearly defined management plan, or does it not make any difference at all?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So going back to Class BC, it's deliberately a light touch part of legislation. So again, 60 days, up to 50 pitches. The only requirement in terms of the contact with the planning authority is that we need to be notified that it's happening. We then notify the fire service. That's the only time that we can't add conditions. You can if you're in a flood zone, but this site is just outside of the flood zone. So it is very light touch, and as we said, it's that intense impact for that 60 days over a calendar year. So it doesn't have to be all together; it can be spread out. The difference between an application, a permanent application, is those conditions which you do not have under a Class BC. So with the conditions and the management plan and the conversations that we're having today, that's the difference, is that you can have those conditions, that they can be enforced, and we've got the mechanisms to do that, which you don't have under Class BC.
Thank you. Helpful? Andrew?
It's just confirmation. The reason I mentioned the other legislation which might or might not be relevant is because if there's a requirement for more infrastructure as a result of satisfying that legislation, it does become a planning issue in so much as the site will become more cluttered with what is or might be required.
Indeed. Yeah.
Understood. Understood the applicant would be required to come back and you'd look at that on its merits, whether it's just tipped the balance, as it were, and was too much infrastructure or not. But please do look at the application as presented before you.
Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't want to particularly prolong this, but I hear what Tim says about whether it's on-site management permanently or warden or somebody walking by every now and again. That's the crux of the matter for me. That is the total crux of the matter for me. I understand the landscape officer did have objections, and we've heard from Tim there is enhanced BNG, which is very welcome. But part of what we're trying to do here is, yes, we grant the applicant his thing, but by doing that, do we make the lives of everybody around hell? And for me, I can't support something unless I know exactly what that management plan. So I would like to see that management plan before I personally grant permission, because I don't believe all the bits I've highlighted can be satisfied, or it may happen or may not in the negotiations. I would like to see that management plan, and I would like to think that most of the members here would like to see that management plan before we grant permission. Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Alan?
Yes, I don't really disagree with what Gary said, but and I'm sorry for keeping on coming back with more questions, but the questions come up in the light of the previous answers to other questions. I'd just like the officers to let us know, and if appropriate, give us any advice surrounding this answer. Is it within our gift or within our discretion, as it were, dealing with this application which is made to us, and in the light of the fact that the previous grant of temporary planning permission has not been wholly successful, in that there have, as is acknowledged, been quite a lot of breaches and upset to neighbours, etc. Is it within our discretion to grant another temporary planning permission for, say, 4 or 5 years? Because we haven't got the result out of the previous temporary planning permission that it has been established that the use can be carried on in a way that keeps those who occupy the surroundings happy. It seems to me it is one of those unusual cases where there is an argument that a further temporary consent is justified to see if, when the applicants get their house and act in order, act together, just to test that by another temporary period.
Okay.
If that's within our gift.
John wants to come in and make some comment here, and then I'll refer to you.
So I agree with my colleague across the room. The other thing I think we do need, and we have insufficient information on it, is the management plan itself. Can we have maybe it's a pre-construction or agreement before they start doing anything on site, so we have something that's approved, as opposed to letting it go for 2 or 3 years, which seemed to happen last time. Is that a way forward as well? Thank you.
Or Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. The application was accompanied by a campsite management plan. It is only a couple of sides, and in response to that, Condition 5 seeks to really expand and scrutinise a more expanded management plan with a whole range of considerations.
Just following that, sorry, but there seems to be two, and this is healthy, there seems to be 2 different conversations here. One is around the strength of the management plan and whether there should be a deferral of some sort while it's made even stronger. And as Richard said, it's there, the bones are there, but I can understand, given the sensitivity, why members would like to see more than the bones. So that's one discussion, and that would be a deferral. The other option, to go to Alan's point, is it's generally held, as you all know, that you don't repeat temporary permissions, and there needs to be a rationale. But I think here there is a clear rationale. I would be comfortable in supporting any of you considering that there should be a temporary permission for a decent period of time to see how things went, given that there has been slight changes in the way the place is operated and the relationship between the landowner and the land he owns in the immediate vicinity, as opposed to being near Emsworth. In light of the additional information and concerns from the public, there's plenty of good rationale why you would, in this instance, grant another temporary period. But really, you need to decide whether you feel that it's the management plan needs to come back here or not first before you look at a temporary period. But that's in your gift.
John, do you want to come back?
Sorry, if I may. I think we do need a pre-commencement management plan which identifies everything that we are all seeking so that we can understand precisely how the site's going to be managed, because clearly they're not very good at it. In terms of temporary consent, I also believe there should be a temporary consent for maybe another 3 years, just to, if that's the way we go. So deferring is a possibility, I would suggest.
And it may be that we need to see what that management plan really looks like and the commitment to it before we decide whether or not we're prepared to consider a temporary or a permanent permission on it. Who is next? Paul. Sorry, Andrew.
I'm just concerned that the update sheet shows us that condition 5 satisfies John's concern that the management plan should be submitted and agreed before anything happens, but also that if we revert to temporary permissions, the applicant has already made clear the difficulty of making infrastructure investments on the basis of a temporary permission. And I think we're just putting him in the same position. I just think we're making it very difficult for diversification enterprises and meeting our second purpose by agonising over this. I agree that we need the management plan to be as strong as we've indicated and covering the sorts of things that have been mentioned by Gary and Antonia, but I don't think it's helpful to carry on with temporary permissions and deferrals.
True, but condition 5 actually says prior to the campsite being brought into use, which is rather too late in my view. Andrew, I'll come to you, Daniel.
Just a quick one. I think there's a draft management plan already on the website. It's not a very strong very big one, but that is already there, though obviously we don't have that in front of us unless people have accessed it via their laptops. But the other thing too is, of course, with reference to an extended permission, effectively, the applicant has been on probation for the last 4 years, knowing that this sort of debate could take place when the application came back in front of the committee. So I don't support the idea of an extended, of another temporary application, because the issues which had to be addressed should have been addressed by now.
Thank you. Daniel. Oh, Robert. Were you next? Sorry.
I was going to propose we have deferment so we can see the management plan and agree the management plan before we go forward. So that's a formal proposal. We defer this purely on that basis.
Do we have a seconder for that? Looks like we do, John. Does that finishes what you were going to say? Okay. So can we vote on that straight away?
So you can discuss a bit further and then you need to...
Well, yes. And unless there's any further discussion to be had, it may be that there is no further discussion. Daniel?
Just one very specific point in respect of the amenity building. Reference was made to roof lights, which seems to me surprising in the context of dark night sky policies.
Richard?
It does have 2 roof lights. You can see, hold on a second. You can see them here and also on the elevation. It is quite a small, modest building, and the lighting is intended to be sensor controlled, so it would only be on when the building's in use.
Thank you. Any more discussion required? Gary?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just consulted with my colleague here. I think that, and also we need to know if that building is going to be adequate. With the licence that Andrew brought up, if you're going to have potentially as many people who could be on this site, just by the, up to 2 or 3 pitches per, tents per pitch, and how many people you can get in there, that's clearly not enough for that anyway. And I would debate even if you had 36 people there and only 2 people turned up, that would be pushing it for just 2 anyway. The problem I would have then is a bigger building, which was mentioned by one of my colleagues. Could that tilt it into unacceptability to this application? So I think we need to know. There's a few unanswered questions that we need to know on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, this is a further unanswered question which can come back. Tim.
So, Chair, I don't know if this helps. I think the proposal is to have a vote on deferment to cover, and I take the point, to cover both more detail on the management plan to come here in its full entirety, and secondly, for us to check out, and I'll put it no stronger than that, the interplay between this and the requirements that might be required under other legislation for the amenity block. And if that does drive the need for a different block, then that would also come back here as part of a revision or a change, and you could look at the whole lot in its entirety. So that's what you're...
That sounds sensible. Any more comment?
Can I just confirm back with the proposer that Robert's happy with that and the seconder?
I can confirm that that proposal is absolutely acceptable.
Thank you. And the seconder will feel the same. Excellent. So may we have a show of hands for that proposal, please? Yes. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Right.
Heather?
Yes.
Can I just mention, having exchanged emails with Richard Fryer,
yes.
and I did give my apologies to the last meeting. I was in Hampshire County Council meeting, so I'd quite like that to be added to the minutes, please, for the last meeting that I didn't attend.
I'm sure that'll be fine, yes. Sorry? A 2-minute break. A 2-minute break. please, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll move to the next application, which is land east of Brooks Road, Lewis. And Stella is going to take us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. So just to refer members firstly to the update sheet, further information has been received from the applicant, including minor changes to the plans, which do not affect the recommendation. Following publication of the update sheet, a further 5 letters of support and 15 further letters of objection as of 10:09 this morning, including from Councillor Wendy Maples, have been received. These do not raise anything substantively new that has not already been covered in the officer's report, aside from a few points which I'll just make you aware of. Views that the latest amended plans either do or do not represent a design improvement, a concern that the building will negatively impact views of the downland behind it, a concern that the amendment to the plant enclosure would not avoid noise and maintenance issues to number 50 Morling Street due to the attached timber fencing, and concerns that the applicant has sought to selectively engage with those who support the application through their own public consultation. So in terms of the key considerations for members, there is a conflict with SD35 and HC4 due to a lack of marketing. However, a retail use of this site is considered acceptable on balance, on the basis that a 12-month framework relocation strategy, a £50,000 contribution to town centre initiatives and 2-hour parking could be secured. Regard must also be had to recent applications with similar policy conflicts on the nearby Oldie site, where retail use was considered acceptable. The planning balance is fine. It's set out in detail at paragraphs 7.28 to 731 of the officer's report. It's recognised that the loss of protected employment space is regrettable. However, the economic benefits are also relatively limited, but officers are of the view that a reason for refusal based on the conflicts with SD35 and HC4 could not be sustained. There is also an element of existing retail use on the site. However, officers consider that nonetheless there are unacceptable and insurmountable landscape and heritage impacts as a result of the building's design. And currently there's insufficient information pertaining to noise assessment and mitigation. So this shows you the site location. It's prominently located on the corner of the main industrial site here at Brooks Road. And this slide just shows you all the relevant constraints. So firstly, this blue hatched area here is the Central Lewis principal employment site. The garage building on site does fall within this area, and it's also deemed to be in a B2 employment use, which requires an 18-month marketing exercise for it to be acceptable for another form of use. The remaining buildings on the site carry a 12-month marketing requirement. Also to point out, this blue line here represents what's been designated as a key arrival sequence into Lewis by policies SS1 and SS2 of the neighbourhood plan. These require enhancements to arrival sequences to improve visitors' first impressions of the historic town. I also just want to point out there are nearby residential uses, including this row of terraced houses here and also behind the site. And the Grade 2 listed old brewery building has been converted into flats. This is the conservation area to the south of, well, this is Morling Street, which then becomes the Phoenix Causeway here. There are 3 TPO trees just here, and this little cherry tree here is also the subject of a TPO, which is in the progress of being made. And then this is the air quality management area within Central Lewis. It's a little distance away, but there nonetheless. And a material consideration is the Brooks Road planning brief. So what this does is really kind of look at the whole area of Brooks Road, which is in an employment use. This purple area here is the area which is the principal employment site, so the Central Lewis principal employment site. And then the Brooks Road brief actually looks at the kind of character areas within the main employment land, blue being the main core employment area where most of the employment uses, the B uses, really are concentrated. This pink area here is a mixed employment area which includes retail and distribution. Members may recall the Aldi application last month, which is located here. And then this brown area here is mixed employment and residential. One of the reasons the Brooks Road Development Brief came to being was because of the emergence of residential uses in this area. And then this dotted line here is kind of the historic core of the area. It includes a number of the old brewery buildings, for example, and the Grade 2 listed old brewery, which has been converted into flats. And I think most importantly for this site, the brief identifies this corner area here as a key gateway opportunity site. So this shows you some site photos. I've tried to indicate, for my own benefit really, to remind me where they were taken from. This one here is perhaps one to point out. We talked about this being a key arrival sequence. I think this is also important. As you pop out of the tunnel, the Quilfale Tunnel, this is the snail roundabout, the site here is actually one of the first things that you see. That's that one there. And then a bit further along, this is what the buildings look like a little bit further along. And then this is taken from the other side of the Brooks Road entrance, and that's what the site looks like at the moment. You can see there's clear views of the downland beyond. And some more photos of the existing site. So this from this standpoint here, we look in two directions. Looking that way is this photo here. This is the converted old brewery building, and there's a garden associated with it, which is walled. The garage building, this one here, is actually attached to this wall currently. And then this view here is that one looking towards what used to be a car dealership. I think this building is in current use as a clinic. I don't believe this has got current use at the moment. It's empty, but would have been retail when it was a car dealership. And then this photo here is taken there, and it just shows the row of Victorian terraces, which are located along Walling Street just here. So this shows the existing and proposed site layout. So just to point out, just to point out that the amended plans do actually pull back the plant enclosure. Previously, the enclosure actually attached to the neighbouring wall of number 50. It's been pulled back by some 1.5 metres, so that it no longer actually conjoins with the building, if you like. That was the main change. These are the existing buildings on site. So this is the garage building, which is in the principal employment area. This building here is an office building, and then this was the main kind of car dealership. So we think really this is in a retail use, probably if it came down to it, and then this is in a clinic use currently. So this would be the proposal. The building footprint is 2,185 square metres in total. There would be 108 car parking spaces with 2 EV charge points and 12 cycle spaces. There would be a brown roof. Apologies, you can't see it on here, but there would be a brown roof kind of coming along this part of the roof, covering about 28% of it. And there would be a large array of PV panels in this location. Effectively, what we have is a large building which presents its back to the primary road frontage here, with a parking-dominated layout, which is one of the main concerns. This is the proposed landscaping plan. I would just walk you through some of the elements so that you kind of are aware. So there is some hedgerow proposed and some tree planting along Davies Lane, which is welcomed. There is an element of hedgerow coming up to that point as well, and then along here. This is a retaining wall. We also have close board fencing. This is the kind of, this walling would just be exposed. It exists already until we get to that point there when we've got 3 metre close board fencing attached to existing brick walling and then to number 50 as it comes around the corner. Here there would be a concrete acoustic wall, because this is where the deliveries would happen. So part of the noise mitigation is that we would have an acoustic wall here, which would then be faced with a 3 metre high timber close board fence. And then this is the plant enclosure, which would have its own enclosure, and then it would also be surrounded by fence, which would have a kind of climbers going up it. And then along here, this would just be retained as existing. It's a brick wall with like a steel fence above it. And then along all of this, we would have the kind of the knee-high, what do you call it, what you normally see outside of Lidl's, the timber knee rail, which would go around most of the site here. Also, just to point out that there would be, the site would meet its required statutory BNG, partly through this area of scrub, and then other interventions, including hedgerow and so on. These are the proposed elevations. There have been a number of iterations providing different elevation materials, with this being the final version. So originally we had all white cladding, a sort of very typical Lidl building. That was amended to brick, and now we have brick with some flint panels along the southern elevation, and timber cladding. This was an effort really to try and sort of animate this very blank, what would be otherwise a very blank wall. The flint panels are now proposed to be hand-coursed rather than panels, like flint panels, which does add a level of interest, but nonetheless doesn't affect the recommendation. In officer's view, the building still presents a relentless back wall of some 81 metres in length, close to the road edge, and the existing buildings actually do a better job of relating to this prominent corner location. This is an artist's impression of what the building would look like. It's taken from the other side of the junction with Brooks Road. And then some other artist impressions of what the building would look like. So just to remind members of the reasons for refusal, primarily landscape and heritage harm as a result of the design, which is very standard building. Insufficient noise assessment and mitigation, and then the technical absence of a Section 106 to secure the necessary obligations. And that, members, is the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella. So now we have 3 speakers against this application, and these speakers are speaking against the application, remember, not against the recommendation. So the first one is Chris King, who is representing himself.
Chair, members of the committee, this proposal will bring long-term harm to Lewes, and those harms are clearly set out in Stella News report. First, employment. Although the site looks mostly empty, it currently accommodates 20 to 40 jobs and could support far more. If returned to employment use, as the local plan intends, the site could accommodate 100 or more jobs across workshops and small businesses, even a brewery in the Lewes tradition. Lidl's own figures offer around 40 full and part-time roles, with just 3 to 10 staff on site at any time. Lidl assert there is no demand for the site. ST35 requires 12 to 18 months of marketing evidence to show this, but only limited marketing took place, and that showed demand. Once this land becomes a Class E retail box, any wider employment potential is gone, a loss described as regrettable, and the economic benefits of the proposal are, as noted, limited. This is a critical site, and we will not get it back. Secondly, design and heritage. The design causes serious harm. The design and historic environment reports are clear. This plan does not respect the gateway setting of Lewes and fails to integrate with Molling Street. The first view from the tunnel would be a blank wall and little signage. That change is permanent and it downgrades how Lewes presents itself. Third, the human impact. I live at 50 Molling Street, the closest residential property. The loading bay and air conditioning units will sit directly beside my house, and their noise would affect my daily life. But I am speaking today because the impacts extend far beyond my boundary. This land has been in commercial and industrial use for many years, and a well-used path has run across it for decades. My definitive map modification order reflects that lived reality. The site has always been functionally connected to its surroundings, and it should evolve in a way that strengthens the town, not harms it. Lewes has a character worth protecting. Your officer's professional advice is clear. The site causes serious heritage harm, and the proposal removes the site's wider employment potential. Lidl's recent design tweaks do not address the fundamental issues that underpin that harm. Please refuse this application on the grounds of loss of employment, heritage and neighbouring amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Andrew Simpson, who is representing Lewes Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Simpson and I run a small planning consultancy in Lewes, and I've been a member of the executive of the Lewes Chamber of Commerce since 2021. I'm here today to ask you to add 2 further reasons for refusing this application. As you know, planning applications are required to be determined in accordance with the policies in the development plan, unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. Given that this is the case, I'd like to draw your attention to 2 aspects of this proposal that have so far been overlooked in the officer's report. First, the loss of the 900 square metres of protected B2 floor space. This is not disputed. It's stated as a fact in paragraph 7.28 of the officer's report. And in paragraph 7.29, as we've already heard, the officer says that the loss is regrettable. But it's more than regrettable. It's contrary to your own policy, SD34, which is not referenced in the officer's report. It says at paragraph 3 of that policy that the authority will safeguard all existing employment sites. Change of use applications will only be permitted provided that evidence of a robust marketing campaign clearly demonstrates that there is no market demand for the business premises. That's SD34. In this case, there is market demand for the business premises, as reported in a representation to you on the 10th of June 2025 from Danny Tapper of Beak Brewery, a growing and very successful local business. Danny reports that he had agreed draft heads of terms with Caffins, the previous owner of the site, in 2024 to build a new brewery on the site, but the offer was withdrawn upon the sale of the land to Lidl. So the loss of B2 floor space is not justified. Second, the representation from the Chamber of Commerce reminds us both that both national park and national government planning policies are aimed at protecting the high street, with town centres being the preferred location for retail activities to support the role that town centres play at the heart of local communities. The Lewes Chamber is working hard to support our local traders in very difficult trading conditions, and we believe that this position should be reflected in the reasons for refusal of this application, notwithstanding our appreciation of the need for discount retail stores in this cost of living crisis. We believe that Lewes, though, is well catered for in this regard, not least with your own recent decision to expand the Aldi store in Lewes. To conclude, I am here, therefore, to ask that 2 further grounds for refusal are added. Loss of 900 square metres of protected B2 floor space in a principal employment site, contrary to policies SD34 and SD35 of your local plan and policy HC4 of the neighbourhood plan, impact on the high street food stores contrary to policy HC1.
Very sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And the third speaker is Janet Barr, who is representing Lewes Town Council and as a ward member for Bridge Ward.
Chair, members, I'm speaking on behalf of Lewis Town Council as a ward councillor and as a resident of Lewis to support the officer recommendation for refusal of the Lido proposal at Brooks Road. This reflects the formal position of Lewis Town Council, which has already recommended refusal of this application. First, the application fails to address traffic and transport impacts, contrary to local plan policy SD19. Brooks Road is already congested, and this store, with over 100 parking spaces and AGV servicing, will significantly increase vehicle movements. More traffic means more air pollution and carbon emissions, undermining the national park's climate objectives and public health priorities. The mitigation of a travel plan and minor bus contribution is wholly inadequate. Second, the drainage strategy lacks detail and does not meet SD50. Sustainable drainage system. The site introduced extensive hard surfacing, yet relies on attenuation tax rather than natural SUDS solution like permeable paving or rain gardens. Lewis has a history of surface water flooding, and approving without a robust policy-compliant SUDS plan is a risk to community safety. Finally, the claimed public benefits, retail choice, and jobs do not outweigh the harm. Lewis already has Aldi and Tesco nearby. This proposal adds retail sprawl at the expense of sustainable transport, drainage resilience, and environmental quality. And at MPPF, benefits must clearly outweigh harm. Here, they do not.
Is there more you want to say?
Yeah, on behalf of Lewis Town Council, as a ward councillor and as a resident, I urge the committee to uphold the recommendations for refusal for conflict with SD19, SD50, and NPPF's principles on sustainable development, climate, and health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have Adam Forstick, who is representing Lidl Great Britain Limited, who's the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Adam Forsdick, the Regional Head of Property for Lidl. This multi-million-pound investment in Lewis would create new jobs for local people and make efficient use of a brownfield site, which is currently occupied by a collection of buildings of varying architectural styles and build quality. We have 2 tenants still on site. Ballon Enterprises has requested an early lease exit after securing a new location, which we've agreed to. The Doctor Studio lease expired in October, and we have provided a flexible extension at half-price rent to support their relocation. The new store would provide increased choice and competition, which should be welcomed given the continuing cost of living crisis. The existing Aldi store has a monopoly as the only deep discount grocery retailer in Lewis and has been trading well above its company average for years. There is significant community support for our proposals, and we have worked hard to positively respond to comments received during the planning process. The proposals before you today have been shaped by this feedback. The consultation resulted in 640 supportive responses, and there are 220 letters of support on the planning file. The primary reason officers have recommended refusal is design. We're confident that the other reason, noise, can be resolved by condition, and we're happy to work with officers to ensure the proposal is deemed acceptable. Officers have concluded that the proposals are otherwise acceptable in all other matters subject to agreeing the Section 106 terms. Turning to design, our design team has sought to strike the fine balance between operational requirements, ensuring any new store on the site trades successfully, and a design that is complementary to local characteristics. This is a bespoke store designed for Lewis. We have listened to officers and included brick, hand-coursed flint, and timber cladding to the external walls. The store is strategically positioned to create an active frontage on Brooks Road, enhancing the site's appearance along one of the most active surrounding streets. The prominent glazed curtain wall creates a focal point to the building, whilst also providing views into the store. The building's size and appearance is consistent with the existing street scene. using modern materials and simple form to create a clean aesthetic that reflects its context between residential properties on Morling Street on one side and a petrol station and other large-scale retail uses on the other. The environmentally friendly brown roof will be installed, and a rain garden in the car park is included. Existing mature sycamore trees are retained, and the landscaping includes a mix of new trees, shrubs, hedges, grass, and climbers. Extensive tree planting along the site boundaries and new hedgerow will enhance the route along Davies Lane. All these features have been added specifically for Lewis. We believe the proposals, as designed, strike the balance between enhancing the appearance of the site and delivering a successful retail store. I would therefore urge members to approve the application today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, you've heard everything we have to offer now, so it's up to you now. Debate. Who would like to start? Andrew?
Yes, I mean, I've got very little to say other than the fact that the recommendation probably sums it up very well indeed. But what is interesting, it isn't saying this is not an application we would, that is impossible to support. It is impossible to support it in its current form. And I think, therefore, if the applicant went away, worked at the building, but interestingly also worked at the information which is the fact which is referred to in reason 2, which is the impact on the neighbouring domestic properties, which Mr. King referred to. I mean, it seems to me that we could or should be looking at an application at some point in the future which would be changed and would be suitable. And let's wonder what would happen. But I go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you. I'm interested in the submission from Andrew Simpson about the contrary to policy SD34 on the High Street, which I think was SD35 that he quoted, and whether these additions as reasons for refusal would strengthen our hand if this were to come to appeal or not. So I'd appreciate a reaction to that.
Thank you. Stella?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Paul. Policy SD34 really talks about the rural local economy mainly. So it talks about promoting and protecting businesses linked to key sectors of farming, forestry and tourism. So that's one we rely upon a lot when we're talking about businesses of that nature. I recognise that it does require support for small and micro businesses, and I think potentially this is a reference to the fact that Beak Brewery, anecdotally, and actually according to the submission by Beak Brewery, were interested in the site, and clearly they are a local business. Unfortunately, though, we can't really control, land ownership, the nature of applications put in front of us, and whilst, an application from Beak Brewery would probably have a very different recommendation before you today. That's not what we have in front of us. I don't think policy SD34 is particularly relevant to our, to our considerations of this site for that reason. I don't know if Tim, you want to say anything else different?
Yeah, Rob, I think probably wants to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could also add, just to discuss about SD35 as well, which is the key policy here, and draw members' attention to paragraph 7.28, where the report is very honest that there is conflict with SD35 and HC4. As with everything that we consider, it's the balance, it's the additional information that's going into that. So that final summary and conclusion there acknowledges that that's the starting point. It then discusses all of the work that has happened during the application to reach that conclusion. So I just wanted to highlight that SD35 is the main one here. We acknowledge that it conflicts with it. However, on balance, at the end of that assessment, that's why that's not been included as a reason.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. And I wasn't going to do this, but Rob's right, and SD35 is a challenge, and we're not pretending that. But things have moved on since that policy, so this has given us as officers a further challenge, which is that SD35 seeks to protect B, land, and B1 offices, B2 industry, B8 storage. But of course, since that time, Class E has come in, which puts retail, commercial, commercial business and a whole host of things together, including B1. So unfortunately, that policy is quite tricky because it seeks to preserve and protect and ensure a steady supply of B land, but B land is now divided into two different sectors. I hope that makes sense. And one of those sectors does now incorporate, in effect, retail. So that's another reason why we are suggesting and not recommending that that is a reason for refusal.
Okay. Now, who's next? I think Gary was next, actually.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I had a tick next to 7.28, and Tim eloquently said that Class E now has really caused us problems. And I know we're not here to redesign, but I would like a really robust reason too. We've had this this particular problem in East Grinstead with Waitrose, delivery vehicles with their noisy reversing bits and pieces right next to that. So I'm not here to redesign, but it makes sense to move that completely the other side away from the residential, but that's not me to redesign it. I totally agree with the officers, what they've said, and I shall be supporting the officers on this one.
Thank you. Let's start with Robert.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I agree. It's an excellent report, Stella, so I'm absolutely supporting what you said, but I've got a really planning issue. If you look at the Recharge 1 decision, and this is really for Tim, and they went through the special qualities of the National Park, and I'm going to go through all 7 of them. Number 1, diverse and inspirational landscapes. I'm not sure that applies here. Number 2, rich variety of wildlife and habitats. I'm not sure that applies here. Item 3, tranquil and unspoiled places. I'm not sure that applies. Question number 4, an environment shaped by centuries of farming and embracing new enterprise. I'm not sure that applies. Number 5, great opportunities for recreational activities and learning experiences. I'm not sure that applies. Number 6, well-conserved historical features and a rich cultural heritage. That's debatable. Number 7, distinctive towns and villages, and here we are on very strong grounds. I'm just worried when you read that Recharge 1 decision against us, which we're all surprised by, and you go through those special qualities, is PIN's going to say that all those qualities do not apply to an industrial estate in Lewis?
Yeah. And I think everyone's aware of our view as officers on that particular decision, and members. My initial response would be we can't do everything just by one inspector's decision, and there are others that don't take the same approach, i.e. others that don't go through the special qualities and almost use that as the only criteria. Point 1. Point 2, I'd be confident in this case around special qualities 6 and 7 would come into play and we could justify it. And probably the third point I'd say is almost regardless of that decision, this is far more based on design and impact and then amenity rather than the principle of that particular greenfield. So I think there's a distinction.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Chairman. I also support the officer's view on this, and I believe, having looked at the site and the design, there are definitely ways forward that could be achieved on this. Thank you.
Daniel?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd say I definitely support the officer's recommendation. Just one thing in terms of local knowledge, I would underscore the comments that were made by one of the speakers about the potential traffic issues at the roundabout that's at the northwest corner there. I think those have been to some extent understated, because I think the level of traffic would be considerably more than is on the site as it currently is, and already that roundabout is very overcrowded. And really supporting what Gary says, I don't see quite how the noise issues can be resolved, both from delivery vehicles and the plant, if they're stuck in the corner so close to residential buildings. I just don't see how anything can be achieved that doesn't substantially damage the quality of life of people living in those buildings that were there first. But that may not be I don't know to what extent that's a planning consideration, but I think it's a very serious one. And in fact, perhaps lastly, I'm quite surprised with regard to the requirement for the 18 months of marketing that seems to have been fulfilled by an email from an agent which actually confirms that there was some demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Alan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I Chair, I'm rather disappointed that we don't feel able to substantiate the employment-based objection here, because I'm aware, as will be other members, that we have permitted retail on employment land elsewhere in the park, but in circumstances where it seemed pretty clear that there had been marketing attempts for prolonged periods which didn't give rise to any demand from employment land, whereas it sounded from what we were told that there actually had been, at least on part of the site, an employment use, I think the brewery referred to, which was keen on the site, which actually wanted to make use of the land. So it is, I'm prepared to take the officer's advice on this, but I have to say it is a bit disappointing to me that we don't feel able to run that objection on a site like this, where there actually, it appears, has been a demand for employment use. But the main point is that in all other respects other than that disappointment, I'm entirely in support of the officer's recommendation. Lewes is by far the largest town in any national park in Britain. It is a very fine town too, but not every single aspect of Lewes, unsurprisingly, since it's a large-ish town, very large by national park standards. Not every bit of it is perfect, and I was very interested to hear about the local policies aimed at improving the appearance of particular access routes, because that often is one of the weak points of historic towns, that undesirable, mainly 20th century things have been done in the outskirts, which don't look very nice as one approaches the centre of a historic town. But this is both in that situation and, as far as I can make out, sort of over the road from territory that is in the conservation area. It does seem to me to be particularly important, and it's certainly a point which I find powerful and persuasive, that we should be insisting on things which actually do enhance the appearance of Lewes, even though this site itself is outside the conservation area. We should be insisting on enhancement. It doesn't seem to me enough effort has been made by Liddell to consider the special need to do that and to make any development which takes place on a site like this, especially against that background of that local policy, an obvious attempt at genuine enhancement of the character and appearance of this historic town, as I say, over the road from the conservation area. So I'm wholly in support of all of the officer's recommendations, and as I say, only remain a bit disappointed that we don't feel able to run the employment land point, even on a site like this.
So what we really need now is a proposer and a seconder. Oh, Gary, do you want to say something else?
I'd like to back up what Alan's just said. We've been told on many, many occasions in this room about views in and views out of the national park and conservation areas. And in fact, a lot of the stuff we've ever done in Lewes, we've gone up on top of the cliff to look down. We've been doing all the views in and views out. If we could potentially beef that part up of the, I think that's in reason 1 to refuse. It's listed building conservation areas. We can beef up your reasons why it just doesn't look good. I would greatly appreciate it, but I know what we've got in front of us, but if it's possible, I would fully support that.
Any need for that?
I think it's there.
Tim?
I take the sentiment and understand. I think it's there, and that sort of detail would come out if there was any appeal process. But the reason for refusal gives us enough hooks.
Paul?
I just hope it's helpful that the record of this meeting shows members' concerns about the appalling missed opportunity this uninspiring box of a proposal offers in a strategic gateway site that's so important for Lewes, as members have already said.
Indeed, thank you for that comment. Can I now have a proposer? Gary, thank you, and Janet, the President and Secretary. And a show of hands, please, for the recommendation, which is refusal. Thank you very much. That concludes agenda item 7. So we'll move forward to agenda item 8 now. And agenda item 8 is the former Garden Street auction rooms in Lewis, demolition of existing industrial buildings and provision of 18 residential units. Oh. And Stella is going to take us through this application. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Chair. Again, just to draw members' attention to the update sheet, there's a number of self-explanatory entries there, but just to note that further objections have been received from Lewis Town Council and residents of Tanner's Brook with regard to foul drainage arrangements and the capacity of the sewer to receive foul water from the development, and the risk of pollutants entering the culverted Winterbourne stream from surface water runoff. There's also a response from the applicant's drainage engineer advising that the private sewer will be adopted by Southern Water and that the volume and flow to the sewer is much reduced due to surface water being redirected to the watercourse. Officers note that no concerns are raised with regard to either foul or surface water drainage by Southern Water, the Environment Agency or the local Lead Flood Authority. However, we do acknowledge that the CCTV survey indicates the existing private sewer has some deficiencies. So there is a plan B, which would be to provide a new run in the location originally proposed. Either way, it's likely that some off-site works will be required, and therefore condition 12 has been amended to be a Grampian condition, just to ensure that any necessary off-site works are carried out by the responsible party before the development can be occupied. And then in terms of the surface water, set out at paragraph 7.54 of the officer's report, surface water will be treated via catch pits, permeable paving and green roofs, which will allow a filtration of potential contaminants before they reach the watercourse. And just to add that permeable paving will be wrapped in geomembrane to provide a further stage of treatment. Nonetheless, condition 14 has been strengthened to include measures to prevent pollutants from entering the watercourse, just by way of belt and braces. So in terms of key considerations for this application, the site is allocated under PL1B of the Lewis Neighbourhood Plan for an expected 11 dwellings, so a residential use here is acceptable in principle. Only 2 affordable dwellings are proposed. However, vacant building credit does apply to this site, and the applicant's viability information has been independently assessed and on the authority's behalf and has been agreed. The proposal is not viable with any more affordable homes and cannot deliver any Lewis low-cost housing. The main considerations are therefore the design of the development and impacts upon the character of the conservation area, bearing in mind the lapsed appeal permission, and impacts upon neighbouring amenities and visual impacts, and in particular views of the downland from the conservation area, which I'll cover later in this presentation. Drainage I've just covered, and also access and parking. There are third-party concerns raised regarding insufficient on-site parking and the lack of available on-street parking. However, given the proximity of the adjacent railway station and the central town location, this is a highly sustainable site, and strict compliance with parking standards is therefore not considered necessary. So this shows, sorry, I just jumped to slide I have. No, I haven't, sorry, beg your pardon. So the site is located within the Lewis Conservation Area, which covers a large part of the town. So it falls, let me get my cursor, it falls here within the Southover character area, which is mainly residential in character, with areas of open green space. The characteristics of the conservation area set out in some detail at paragraph 7.12 to 13 of the officer's report. These note in particular the varied topography of the town and roofscape, the variety of materials, and the downland setting of the town. So we've got an aerial view of the site. To the west here, we've got Southover Grange Gardens, which is a local green space. This here is Southover House, which is a 3-storey building. And then the closest residential uses are the terraces along Tanner's Brook, just here, and then 5 and 6 Southover Road. And then this is the listed railway building to the southeast. In terms of the constraints for this site, it is a very constrained site. In addition to being within the Lewis Conservation Area, it's mostly within Flood Zone 2, with very, very small areas within Flood Zone 3, just along the southern boundary there. The topography is also a constraint. There's a drop of some 4.5 metres between the ground levels on Southover Road and ground levels within the northern edge of the site. Also, just to note the presence, this is a winter-born stream, which as it goes through the site and actually under Garden Street, it's culverted. But technically, it's a main river. And then there's also this orange line, which is a bit approximate because I've drawn it, but it's the location of the storm drain or main sewer, which runs east-west through the town. So the watercourse itself requires an 8-metre easement either side of it, and the main sewer requires a 5-metre easement either side of it. And what this means is that really it's only the northern portion of the site which can be developed. So here's some site photos for you. A concern has been raised with regard to the loss of the downland views, which you can see between the buildings there. These views are protected by a number of neighbourhood plan policies, including HG3A and PL1B. The Conservation Area Management Plan, Appraisal and Management Plan 2023, also identifies the town's Chalk Hill setting as a significant contributor to the town's character. And as you can see, depending on where you stand, you can definitely see views of the downland currently from the site and from Garden Street. Also, this is just a view from inside the site. You can't get in at the moment, but this just shows you the big drop that you've got between Southover Road and the ground levels within the site. And then just to show you this, there's a plaque outside which just notes that the site used to be a physic garden a long time ago, and that the Winterbourne powered a watermill once, long time ago. Some more site photos for you. So this shows the approach coming along. So all these views actually look, let me get this right, eastwards. So as you approach along Southover Road, this is kind of what you see. So this is taken from about that point. And then you can't really see the downland from that location, really because of it's very treed. So it's really only when you pop out onto the corner here that you do start to see some of the, I appreciate this hoarding there at the moment. So without that there, you could potentially see a little bit more of that. And then as you come across, start to cross Garden Street, and particularly from here, which is this location here, you do see quite good views of the downland. And it is likely that some of those views would be impeded from some locations when approaching the site from the north and the west. However, from other locations, views would still be achievable. And then this shows you views from the railway bridge. Just to point out, this is protected view 4 in the neighbourhood plan, taken, I believe, from about here, about here, I think. So that looks towards the site, sort of that way. And important to point out, really, is this sort of varied roofscape that you see ascending the kind of, this steep topography, which is very characteristic of Lewis. That's the castle at the top. This is Southover House, which is 3 stories. The development itself would probably come up, I haven't got a wireframe, unfortunately, but it would come up to probably about sort of here-ish. It's a full story lower than Southover House. It wouldn't exceed the tree line, and you could still see views of the rooftops behind it. And then these photos here, that one's actually, I took that from the railway bridge yesterday, just showing you the site from there. Southover House again, the development wouldn't be as tall as Southover House. And then these are some views from actually within the car park from about here. So yeah, you would be able to see it, but it would be against the backdrop of what exists already. This shows you the existing and proposed site layout. So at the moment, we've got 3 largest buildings covering most of the site. I think existing is about 638 square metres, and then what we'll have is a slightly smaller footprint, in fact, of some 560 square metres. The access at the moment is currently quite awkward. That's going to be relocated to this location and rearranged. Just lower ground floor, just to show you how this would be arranged. So there'd be parking for 11 cars in this location here, all of which would have EV charging. In this location here, there would be a communal garden, which would include medicinal planting to reflect the former Physic garden, which historically occupied the site. And then we've got a level of trees and planting. Obviously, it's a bit difficult to plant trees. Originally, it was a row of trees planted along here, but because of the winterbourne, it's not possible to include those. There would be a tree located here and another couple in the site, but it's quite constrained in terms of the ability to plant trees. There would be pedestrian entrances to Unit 8 from Garden Street just here. And then also just from the car park down here, that's pedestrian entrance as well. This would provide cycle parking for 38 cycles, and there would be a further 8 cycle parking spaces here. And then we've got refuse and substation storage just here. So the main entrance from Garden Street would actually be located at street level up here. And there would be a further pedestrian entrance from to Unit 9 from Southover Road, just there. And then this shows you the roof plan. And there are large, expansive areas of biodiverse green roof, which form most of the on-site BNG provision, which will be over 12%. There will also be an extensive solar array. This shows you the proposed south and west elevations. Obviously, this is sort of peeling back, and you probably wouldn't actually see these because there's houses in front, but this sort of peels back, surrounding development to show you the full extent of the elevations. There would be a varied palette of grey and red brick with a flint plinth. This would be the flint, and that would actually wrap around, so you'd see it all the way around here as well. It becomes a flint wall eventually. The elevations are active and faceted with setbacks and varied opening sizes. The design also includes curved corners, which are a notable and typical architectural feature of Lewes, and it will have a varied roof form. This shows you the proposed north and east elevations. And I think important to point out that the building will not exceed the height of the trees which are behind it. And here you can see the outline of Southover House, which is significantly taller than the proposed development. This slide shows you some sections and the relationships between the proposed building and adjoining properties, both at Tanner's Brook and 5 and 6 Southover Road. So Tanner's Brook here, 5 and 6 Southover Road, you can start to see them appearing here. So that section there is this one, and that one is this one. Just to point out that the parapet height here, so there's a little parapet, so it's, it does increase slightly the elevation on this, the roof height or the height of the building on this elevation. It would be some 1.6 metres higher than 5 and 6 Southover Road, but at a distance of some 18 metres. And the submitted daylight study indicates there would be no loss of light for these properties. And again, this actually just shows you the outline of Southover House. And that green is the indicated height of the development. I just wanted to show you a comparison between the proposed scheme and the lapsed appeal scheme. The building does have a slightly higher frontage, as I've just explained, to actually that allowed, by approximately 1.3 metres. However, Southover House, as I've said, is still a full story higher. The built form for the appeal scheme, it extends along much of Garden Street. So this is the extent of the site. So it did actually fill most of the site and the presence along, you know, the frontage of Garden Street, albeit with some gaps in between. And then the current site occupies less of that, with much more of the site at the bottom remaining open, really, you know, not least because of the required standoffs. It's also the case that the allowed appeal scheme was of a similar height, with development sustained across most of the site. And in this case, the development is stepped down. So this is a kind of a uniform height, whereas here we've got a bit of stepping down happening. And therefore, of the loss of views of downland, so in this particular, you know, you could still see it, you could still achieve glimpse views of the downland behind with the appeal scheme. And here you've got a sort of more consolidated part, you know, with no gaps in between, but nonetheless a bigger area here where views can still be achieved. So the loss of views of the downland is therefore not considered to be so significant or harmful as to warrant a reason for refusal. Just showing the different layouts as well. So this was the previous scheme, which is now lapsed. It was for 10 dwellings, arranged, you know, pretty much across most of the site. Here we have development concentrated in the northern part of it, taking up much less of the site overall. I've just included this slide. So this is an indicative schedule of materials which reflect those commonly found in the conservation area. There would be a mix of grey and red brick laid in Flemish bond with areas of perforated brick screen. There would be stacked brick soldier courses over openings and for the parapet wall. And there would be napped hand coarse flint bound. Sorry, the napped hand. This flint wall would be napped flint and hand laid. No panels. There would also be aluminium triple glazed windows and stone sills. Then we've got a visual representation of what the site might look like. This would be the main entrance, just on the corner of Garden Street. And this is a view from lower down in Garden Street. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is where the different sort of bricklaying, what did I call it? I called it something, and it's gone out of my mind. Perforated brick screen, that's the one. So this would be the brick would be laid differently in different parts of the building. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out paragraph 9.1 of the report and the update sheet, and any other amendments or other conditions to address technical matters, and a legal agreement to secure 2 affordable one-bedroom homes of discounted market sales tenure, and the management and monitoring of the biodiverse green roofs for a period of 30 years, because these are significant on-site biodiversity net gain, including a £41,000 monitoring fee. And then the authority be delegated to the Director of Planning to refuse the application if the legal agreement is not sufficiently progressed or agreed within 6 months of today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you. So we'll go now to the public speakers, and we have 3 speakers against this application. The first one is Jennifer Chibnall, who's speaking as a resident of Lewes.
Yes, thank you. Having worked on the Lewes Neighbourhood Plan and being again working on its revision, I am returning to ask that you once again reject an application for this allocated site that does not comply with your or our affordable housing policy. I know that it's very hard to get these policies properly applied, and I do appreciate the case officer's attempts to achieve this here. It would help us all if viability studies address the potential of the site and not of a design presented by a developer which is not intended to be affordable. I recall that question being raised in the committee when considering the first application on this site. Lewes is a compact town, and the protection of the downs gives us no significant space to expand. The loss of our limited space for the homes we need for our local young people to large houses without significant gardens that stood empty a long time, London buyers typically seeking traditional houses with gardens, is why the Lewes low-cost housing policy was devised. That the policy was accepted by the Inspectorate emphasises the exceptional need for affordable housing for the local people of our town. It's a problem for you and for us that the Inspectorate, when it comes to appeals, have not always supported this. But I hope that you will again support the principle that an allocated site must provide a much higher proportion of some kind of affordable housing than this application allows. We should be able to draw on the Parkhurst Road case here. There's also an issue in our town generally of the capacity of the sewage system. In 2024, Ham Lane Sewage Works discharged untreated sewers into the Ouse 259 times for a total of 4,824 hours, including in periods of dry weather. This proposal also seems additionally confused in its handling of sewage and drainage. It is not clear that the local sewers have capacity for a development of this size. It's essential that any permission for this site is buildable in relation to the provision of these basic services. I would also note that the previous application granted on appeal was then put up for sale, as have been other recent permissions in our town. This serves to raise the sale value of the land beyond what can permit a policy-compliant, suitable or locally affordable development to be achieved. I believe this has already been rather the case on this site. This does not help achieve the numbers of dwellings we need and the government seeks, and it degrades the appearance of the town, leaving sites behind increasingly tatty hoardings. We need permissions designed for building and not trading. If this site did not have a permission attached, it might assist us all in getting something that actually works here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Andrew Simpson, who is representing Lewis Conservation Area Advisory Group.
Hello, me again. Thank you. Yeah. This time speaking on behalf of the Conservation Area Advisory Group. As the officer's report indicates, this site has been subject to several planning applications in recent years, but a constant concern expressed by ourselves and other respondents has been that the site should provide a significant amount of affordable housing, as Jennifer just said. This is an imperative if our conservation area is to continue as a thriving mixed community of homes and businesses within our historic core. While we recognise that market conditions are difficult at the moment, we also know that the Parkhurst Road case, that you will no doubt be familiar with, requires developers to plan their housing developments in order to meet the relevant housing requirement. This site has no abnormal costs associated with it, and so the developer should be able to meet the 50% affordable homes required by your policy. Turning to the design aspects of the proposal, we recognise this is a difficult site, and the considerable effort has gone into redesigning this development to avoid the path of storm drains. However, the site lies in an extremely sensitive location between the listed railway station and the glorious Grange Gardens with its arboretum and Tudor house. In this context, and despite our advice, the latest proposals are still too high and overbearing, causing substantial harm both to the setting of Grange Gardens in particular and in interrupting key views towards Lewis Castle from the southeast and the South Downs from the northwest, which I have to say the visual impact appraisal in the application simply doesn't demonstrate properly, and we've done our own work to show that negative impact. The two-storey Tanners Brook terraces are of much more appropriate scale for this site, as was envisaged in the neighbourhood plan, which, as you know, proposes 11 homes, 50% affordable, to reflect the Tanners Brook site in scale and nature. Finally, on appearance, the predominantly grey brick north elevation is still unacceptably monolithic and has the character of an office complex rather than homes. In summary, these proposals should be refused in that they are contrary to your policies and cause substantial harm to the Lewis Conservation Area. If the development is to go ahead in anything like its present form, both we and the Friends of Lewis advise that further design work is urgently needed to minimise its harmful impact on the conservation area. This, I think, is one of those where, when people see this in the future, if it ever gets built, would say, why did they let that happen? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And our third speaker is Janet Barr, I apologise, representing Lewis Town Council.
Chair, members, it's me again. And I'm speaking on behalf of Lewis Town Council and as a resident of Lewis against this application on drainage and flood risk grounds. Drainage is not a technical detail as highlighted. It's a community safety issue. Lewis has a history of surface water flooding And Garden Street itself required recent highway drainage works to protect homes and the carriageway. Adding more impermeable surfaces here without a robust strategy risk repeating those problems. While the design avoids storm drain paths, the proposals do not meet national or local policy requirements. The MPPF expects sustainable drainage systems that manage flows, improve water quality, and provide amenity, not just underground tanks. The Southern's local plan, SD49, SD50, requires natural drainage approaches, climate change allowances, and enforceable maintenance plans. This application falls short on 4 points. First, source control. It relies on tanks, not green SUDS, like permeable paving or rain gardens. 2, exceedance routing. No clear plan for safe overland flow in extreme events. 3rd, climate resilience. No evidence of future rainfall allowances in design. 4, lastly, no binding plans for lifetime upkeep. Approving this will be contrary to MPPF paragraph 182 and local plan policies SD49, SD50, and SD17 on a site already proven sensitive. A tank-dominant solution without green infrastructure or maintenance certainly is unacceptable. So on behalf of Lewis Town Council and as a resident, I urge the committee to refuse or defer until a compliant SUDS strategy is provided, one that prioritizes green infrastructure, manages exceedance, applies climate allowances, and secures maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one speaker in support of this application, who is Guy Dixon from Savills, the agent, on behalf of the applicant, Home Sussex 1 Limited.
Good afternoon, councillors. I speak today on behalf of the applicant, You Are Home. This is a carefully designed and policy-compliant scheme that will deliver much-needed housing in Lewes while addressing the unique constraints of the site. Firstly, it should be noted that the principle of residential development here is firmly established. The site is allocated for residential development in the Lewes Neighbourhood Plan, and the proposals seek to make best use of a previously developed site within the settlement boundary to provide much-needed housing. The design has carefully evolved to respond to the site's constraints, particularly the culverted Winterbourne stream, the main storm tunnel, and the steep topography. These factors constrain the developable area, and the scheme before you achieves a bespoke solution that respects these elements. We have agreed finished floor levels with Environment Agency set well above any projected flood risk level, including appropriate allowances for climate change. The scheme incorporates permeable paving and green roofs with below-ground attenuation of surface water to carefully control surface water runoff rates. Following receipt of initial consultation responses, our team has carefully engaged with the Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority. Both have withdrawn original objections and are now content with the proposals. Highway and access considerations have also been addressed, with no objection from the local highways authority. The vehicular access meets all required standards, and the site's sustainable location close to the railway station and a large range of local amenities supports reduced reliance on private cars. Cycle storage for 46 bikes and EV charging provision further promote sustainable travel. The proposals provide 18 new homes, including 2 affordable units, to be secured through the Section 106. This is actually technically policy compliant because the viability appraisal has been through the council's own review process. The mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes reflects local need and supports the delivery of smaller dwellings identified in the National Parks Housing Needs Assessment. Finally, we believe the design is of high quality and sensitive to its conservation area setting. It uses locally distinctive materials, red and grey brick, napped flint, and incorporates architectural detailing that breaks up the building's massing. The scheme will improve the townscape along Garden Street and South Over Road, replacing redundant industrial-style buildings with a contemporary development that respects heritage while meeting modern sustainability standards. In conclusion, this application seeks to make effective use of a constrained brownfield site to deliver policy-compliant housing. It meets the requirements of the development plan and addresses all technical matters. Accordingly, I respectively ask members to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the public speakers. Members, it's now your turn. Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This site is a recurring nightmare, which has come before us in the past. I agree with what Mr. Simpson for the Conservation Area Advisory Committee said about it being an extremely sensitive location. I'll just remind members that the situation which gave rise to the previous permission that was granted on this site came from a case where unanimously this committee had rejected a proposal which had been recommended to us by our then officer. What I want to say is that I know that permission was granted on appeal for that, but it seems to me that that previous inspector, we've got the appeal decision in our bundle, and I'm afraid our officers in advising the grant of permission here, have failed to have regard to a fundamental point about new buildings in conservation areas. I've reminded myself this morning on my iPad of section 72 of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act, which indicates that special attention has to be given when development in a conservation area is being considered to the desirability of conserving and enhancing the character and appearance of the area, being the conservation area. There's case law which makes it quite clear that what that means, what the desirability is, what the enhancing or conserving is, that means conserving or enhancing the reason, the character or appearance, which was the reason why the area is a conservation area in the first place. It doesn't mean, oh, you can have, if the decision maker thinks this is some sort of modernist block, I like it, and therefore it's acceptable. It has to be something which conserves or enhances the reason why the area is a conservation area. In my judgment, and this is the main point I want to, I cheerfully would have gone off to the High Court about that inspector's decision myself, because it didn't deal with that point at all. But that's water under the bridge. Nothing nightmarish has yet happened on this site. The site remains as yet undeveloped. I actually think this newer scheme is less bad than the scheme of 5 years ago, but it still is not good enough. It still does not recognise that point, that it ought to be designed in a way which conserves or enhances the character or appearance of the Lewis Conservation Area, that character or appearance which led to it being a conservation area. You've only got to go to Lewis, or indeed read the Conservation Area Appraisal, although Lewis has got mixed character in some respects. It is not a conservation area because of the presence in it of buildings which look like the application proposal. We need to have something on a sensitive site like this which is paying special attention to what is the character of Central Lewis, and obviously so. And this just isn't good enough. It's less bad, but it is not good enough for the grant of permission here. So I will be voting against it.
Thank you very much, Alan. Gary, next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I might have to take a contrary view from my learned friend on that one, I'm afraid. Actually, I do recall the previous one, and I think as we all thought, oh, Plan Inspector didn't like our decision. So the principle has been established on this site. I personally think it's a lot better than the previous site. But I would like to ask either Tim or Rob or Stella just to explain to our listeners and the people in the room about why the affordable housing element of it falls below the 50%. And then I've got a few more questions, but I think it's quite important for that to happen because it hinges on what they just said. It only has, 2 out of the potential what it is. But can I come back after if that's answered,
Yes.
please?
Yeah. Can we have that, please?
Thank you, Gary. So in terms of SD28, the starting point obviously is 50%, which would be 9 units. However, there's the ability for the applicant and the authority to take into account vacant building credit, which is a government incentive. As you heard earlier, there's quite a lot of floor space on this site which is vacant, which they can then use to offset any affordable housing provision, which makes a big dent in that. And then we also have a number of, the site is highly constrained. We've got contamination, the drainage probably will need redoing. And actually, just in terms of the materials here, because of the conservation area designation, this will require a high spec of materials to be used. And there's no getting away from that. So what this means is that the costs are particularly high. So we've had Bruton Knowles who've looked at the applicant's viability assessment. We've also had a costs plan from the applicant setting out what they think their costs will be. We've had this independently looked at as well by a quantity surveyor who's agreed pretty much with what they're saying. So overall, taking all of that in the round, we are confident that the site would not be viable with any more units than 2 for all of those reasons.
Yes, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to take our thinking perhaps a bit wider because we have had this discussion at various workshops that are informing the local plan review. And there's also been quite a lot of government analysis on brownfield, greenfield and what you can get in terms of goodies. And the evidence clearly shows that on brownfield sites, which we do want to promote and use, issues of viability, contamination, constraints, and this certainly has, and those 2 great big pipes that probably weren't fully assessed at the time of the general allocation, are certainly making an impact. More broadly, delivering the required affordable housing on brownfield sites anywhere in the country is generally trickier than on greenfield sites. And I'm not making a political statement about promoting one or the other. It's just the evidence shows that. So with that broader picture in mind and the fact that you've heard Stella explain that vacant building credit takes away a good chunk of the affordable housing that one might wish and seek to get, and then viability takes away the element that's left and brings us down to 2. Whilst disappointing, is actually quite good that we're getting those. That would be, that's a judgment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I continue, please?
Yes. Okay.
I 100% agree. Brownfield sites do present a challenge, and that's the basis of any district plan or plan across the country, having brownfield sites. You don't get everything you want, but we do want this developed. Because when we visited this site, you look at it and you go, is it the best design on the planet? Probably not. It's a hell of a lot better than the last one, so I have to go with that one. It's just, the question I would like to is a really insignificant little one, really. Could you just go back one? So we saw the photographs that you took, and another one. That's it there. Is there any way, stupid as it sounds, that plaque can be put on the wall on the site? Because I think and it sounds silly, but when we all looked at it, we all looked at that and thought, oh, okay. It's obviously significant to the people of Lewis. So I therefore think, if it's possible, that could go, or it could go into their museum or something like that. I just don't want it to be thrown on a skip, that's all. But I think it's pretty good, because I was going to ask about the retaining wall, because we all thought, well, that's not a bad wall. But with the way you've done, showed us all the CGIs, it's not possible. So therefore, I'm going to support it. I think it's either that, or what else are we going to do? Is it going to sit there forever and a day? So I think at some point this site has to be developed. So therefore, I will be supporting you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Paul.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have something to say about the plaque?
Well, just to clarify, Gary, that's the plaque there. Yeah. So it exists, and this wall will remain as is. So it'll be there.
Yes, I'm with Gary. I think this is something that should be warmly supported. I'm very familiar with this site. My first job in 1981 was in the County Planning Department in Southover House, overlooking this site. I've bought woodworm chairs in the auction rooms and learned better. But you know, it's been an affront to a conservation area for many, many years. And, you know, we can't keep putting off saying yes to proposals that not only will, you know, we should be presumed to be in favour of because they're sustainable development in any case, but, you know, really considerately designed with textures and materials and a variety of elevations that have gone to great lengths, I think, to reflect the character of the conservation area. You know, with environmentally beneficial features and all sorts of aspects that I think are very positive for the town and for this particular location. I think I just find many of the concerns about views, impact on Grange Gardens, impact on the other listed buildings, you know, just completely. I just don't understand them. I think they're incredible, given the enhancement that a building here would make. Opposite, after all, a Southover House, which itself is not exactly a jewel in the crown. So it's going to improve things enormously. And the last thing I think we want really is just another row of terraced cottages. This, which, given the constraints of the site, can't be accommodated. This goes to great lengths to work its way around a very difficult site and very difficult constraints and come up with a very attractive solution.
Thank you, Paul. Daniel, and then John.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just want a question of detail on the affordable housing. I mean, I note that one of the issues raised about the tenure that's been chosen is that it's considered that no registered provider would be willing to take on two houses. But I just wonder whether there was any consultation with the Lewis District Council housing team, given that their strong track record of stepping in and taking on exactly these kind of properties. I think they might well be more open than a traditional registered provider to taking on properties like that, in which case that more appropriate rental tenure could potentially have been achieved.
Stella?
Thank you. So we did consult with the Lewis housing officer, who obviously has, you know, insider knowledge of such matters, but also just from recent experience, yes, whereas Lewis Eastbourne Homes were willing to take on a number of smaller you know, concentrations of units in a more dispersed fashion in Lewis town, it's not the case currently. Certainly, I don't know if you remember the Castlemas site, they were willing at one stage to take on 4 of the 4 units, but then sort of were not able to because they'd planned for bigger projects elsewhere. So actually at the moment we're finding that that isn't the case, even with Lewis Eastbourne Homes. And, you know, we work with a number of registered providers and know that really the you know, small numbers of affordable homes are not something that they are able to really easily manage just because of the distances and, you know, issues with managing those units that kind of brings up. Discounted market sales, we would normally secure a 30% discount. That's to be negotiated through the Section 106 agreement. That is in perpetuity. And we think that this is preferable to either a sort of shared equity project where you can staircase out, or indeed shared ownership, which requires, again, an element of management, but also in terms of registered providers are not attractive any longer. They are very expensive to manage, own and maintain.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Chairman. This is clearly a highly constrained site. The layout is the layout. You're not going to get much more in terms of space on that site. It just doesn't work. I support the design and the materials proposed, and that's all I need to say.
Thank you. Any more? Andrew?
Yes, I've been listening to some of the issues around design, viability, etc. And what I was going to raise in any case was the fact that if you go back to the Lewis neighbourhood plan, which was presumably deemed compliant and deliverable, they expected 11 dwellings and a 50% allocation of affordable housing. Well, we've heard why the affordable housing element has reduced, but we're looking at 18 dwellings and we're looking at viability issues. Do we have to take on board that the world has changed, that in fact that when the Lewis plan was perceived, which was some years ago, I believe now, although it might have been updated, I'm not with it, that things were possibly rosier as far as viability and other issues were concerned. And we will be having to take this into account, not just with an application like the one we've got in front of us today, but with others, that material costs have gone up, etc., etc. And indeed, we ask as an authority, and also national legislation requires more hoops and hurdles to be dealt with. So I sort of leave it for comment.
Comment?
Yeah, I mean, both plans were adopted in 2019. We're now in 2025, heading to 2026. The simple answer is yes, you have to take into account all the material considerations that have changed since that time.
Thank you. Antonia.
Yes, I shall be supporting this one. Just going back to Alan's point about enhancing the character of the Lewis Conservation Area, it seems to me that the use of materials, hand-coursed flint and brick, and the use of greening, widespread greening, do serve to enhance the character. And given that you can't build a row of terraced houses because it's a very constrained site, and it's got to be a flatted block, which does then deliver a very healthy number of small dwellings, that point seems to me to be met. So I think overall this is a good scheme.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Tom?
I was just going to ask a clarification around maybe the parking facilities. You mentioned, I think, 11 parking spaces, and the area is quite heavily controlled parking. If you could just clarify the parking.
Sure. So yes, there would be 11 parking spaces. I would say actually that at the time of the pre-app, design officers and so on were fairly keen on it being a car-free development, really because it is such a sustainable location right next to the train station, and it's a town centre location. However, we have 11 parking spaces, which would serve obviously only 11 of those units. The Highway Authority have advised that it's very unlikely that future occupants of the site would receive a parking permit to be able to park nearby. So it's really a question then of buyer beware. There are only a limited number of parking spaces, and not all occupants will be able to park on site or nearby.
Thank you. Okay, everyone's finished. Do I have a proposer and a seconder for the current? Thank you, Gary and Paul. Oh, sorry, I thought you were nudging me. So, the recommendation you have in front of you is complete. May I have a show of hands for support for it, please? Thank you. And against? One. And a sustainer? Abstainer? Sustainer. Abstainer. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. So that is permitted. Thank you. So we'll move now to item number 9, which is our enforcement update. So, Jeff Beck is going to take us through the report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, thank you, and good afternoon, members. You have the report in front of you. We last reported the enforcement matters to you in the July committee, and it was asked of us at that time that you wanted to see figures of comparison, figures with the other host authorities. So we've done that. So we've done that in a tabulated form in the report. I hope that has helped. I hope that is what you had intended by asking for that. And if there's any questions on those things, then please do ask.
Turn it on. We have a public speaker for this application who is Jeff Blackett, who is representing Minstead Residents Group.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to address you, particularly this late in a very long meeting. My name is Jeff Blackett. I represent the Minstead Residents Group, talking about the sand pit in Minstead. I'm sure many of you are aware of the history of the Minstead sand pit and the many breaches of planning conditions by Dudman, the operator. No sand has been extracted from there for nearly 15 years, and the site has remained inactive. Although we understand Dudman has maintained the heavy plant machinery, the rest of the site has been left untouched. The boundary fence is in a state of disrepair. There's been some recent improvement. There's been no progressive restoration, and one end of the sand pit has a cliff edge which poses a serious risk to the safety of anyone straying onto the site. In 2019, this committee gave permission for further sand extraction subject to 28 conditions, the ROMP conditions. It's a number of those conditions that have been breached and which I hope you are now going to address. Most importantly, the first condition was that winning and working of sand should cease no later than the end of November 2024. Thereafter, within 6 months, a revised restoration plan should be submitted and agreed, and all buildings, plant machinery should be removed. Finally, the area should be restored within 12 months of permanent cessation of sand extraction, or by the 30th of November 2025, whichever is earlier. We've now passed that date. Between 2019 and the end of November 2024, Dudman did not attempt to mine any sand. Whether or not Dudman ever had any real intention of working the site during that period is a moot point, but no effort was made to comply with the ROMP conditions. Just before the expiry of the deadline, last November 2024, Dudman submitted a planning application to extend the conditions by 5 years. We objected to that extension in our letter dated the 10th of December 2024, which I hope you've all read, but if you haven't, I urge you to read it. Again, Dudman has not done what you asked, and the application has been returned to him. So today, Minstead Sandpit remains inactive, but there has been no attempt by Dudman to restore the site. There is still traffic in and out of the site because Dudman employees often park a large lorry there overnight or over the weekend. The site is an eyesore and a blot on the national park. There is no requirement for sand extraction from this site because the soft sand review in 2020 determined that sufficient sand could be extracted from 3 other sites until the next review in 2033. In short, it's time for real action to restore the site to nature. Now, the SDNPA has been...
I'm very sorry, but you have run out of time. 3 minutes. Sorry. But well, thank you very much for your submission.
Earlier, you allowed somebody to speak on behalf of the residents.
Only because he shouted over me. I'm very sorry.
I've got about 30 seconds left.
Well, I'm sorry, but you have run out of time. Everybody gets 3 minutes, and I'm afraid you're just the same as everybody else.
Can I refer you? Can I then refer you to...
No, I'm afraid you can't, because you've run out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackett. Mr. Blackett was the only speaker we had on this, so we have it now down to the members. Gary.
Going first again. We did visit this site because I do distinctly remember getting wet because I didn't read the little bit that it was told to bring welly boots. We've just referred to where's the status of that application? Because we did do it on behalf of the Minerals and Waste Plan, and I think some of the questions were asked, if I recall, were what's happening, how much more can they take, and all the rest of it. But he could come in and request it under the Minerals and Waste policy.
Shall we ask the officers for a bit of an update
very
on
helpful,
this?
please. Yeah.
Please.
Yes, thank you for that question. There was an application that was, as Mr. Blackett's very helpfully set out, there was an application a good 12 months ago which was being considered, but due to the lack of environmental statements and other information that was required, it was actually returned to them a few weeks ago. And that has run for a year, and that is, you get the sense of frustration from Mr. Blackett and other residents because of that process, which in effect delayed the enforcement on the restoration scheme. And it's that which is extremely pressing now, and we now do have a timetable with the operator to get that restoration done within the next 12 months, and failure to do so will carry very serious enforcement culpabilities.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Andrew.
Yes, I mean, even before Mr. Blackett spoke, noting that we have just 3 pages in front of us, is this, perhaps this is an update on the statistics you referred to, but otherwise we don't have any information about any outstanding enforcement or other matters. This site, I've been around here a long time. I've been on the planning committee a long time, from the last century. I was in a planning committee in Chichester, and this site was very well known then. And whilst there were issues when Hanson were taking the sand from it, they actually worked it out, and that was that. And of course, Dudmans have done work since, some of the work being to create the situation where the referred to sheer face is there. Now, why I'm saying this is because every officer knows, and those members who've been around whilst we've discussed this, knows that this site is a hot potato in every sense of the word. Furthermore, that there is a very, very strong residents group. And that's the reason you've heard from a representative today. I'm aware that they have got filing cabinets full of papers pertaining to this. And of course, for a long time, it was dealt with by, or not dealt with, by West Sussex County Council. And we have picked up the issue. So I do feel that possibly the next time we get one of these reports, we do need to have important and relevant information much more thoroughly in front of us. There is just one other issue I'd like to raise whilst I've got the floor. In para 1.7, the one little piece of information we're given by way of an update is with reference to Blind Lane, Lurgashall, where it refers to the fact that the compliance date was the 20th of October, and it has not been dealt with. And Chichester officers are starting further proceedings nearly 2 months on. I strongly suspect that people noted what was happening before the 20th of October, and knowing what it's like, and the fact we've got the strength of the High Court injunction behind us, people ought to have hit the ground running very hard on the 20th of October, because it sends a message to not just the residents and others who are concerned, but also the sort of people who would consider a similar sort of activity in the future, that the planning authority aren't going to be quite as quick off the mark as they should be.
Thank you. Would the officers like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. It is the case that the site is cleared, there's no one living on it. What they haven't complied with is the restoration of the land. all parties have disappeared into the ether. There is a tracing agent trying to contact them for contempt of court, and that will then be heard once they are found.
Thank you. Yes, Tim.
Just to add to that, and thank you, Andrew, and other members, I think what I'm hearing is on high-profile cases, a similar paragraph as 1.7 for some of the other matters, including Minstead. So we'll take that away. That's the first point. The second is, and I'm very pleased of our relationship with Chichester and the hard work Rob, and I should mention Jess, who's done a lot on this as well, in terms of many of these cases, that we do have quite a robust enforcement. I know it's not always recognised, and in times, to be robust in enforcement, you actually have to take your time. That sometimes pays dividends because you can then evidence that you've given every opportunity. I've been involved in court cases where you're sent back to give it another inverted commas trial or year or two. So I do understand the frustration. In both these cases that we're talking about, we're being as hard as we can and trying to send out that message. And you will see in some of our planning newsletters that we highlight enforcement cases. And again, I'm aware of other authorities that don't do that, because for everybody that is delighted about an enforcement case, there will be an individual or company that might not be so. So often the comms advice is to just lay low. But I assure you, we try and do everything we can within reason when we can to shout about the enforcement victories and follow up hard. And that's not just a promotion I'm saying, it's true. There are other authorities that tread far more carefully.
Thank you. Anybody else? John.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a bit disappointed not to see Long Road Soberton on this list of paragraphs. Perhaps now's not the time to update me on it, but I think those sorts of enforcement should be on this list. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else? Nobody got anything else? Okay. So the recommendation is to note the update on enforcement action. Thank you very much, which we have done. And the next item on the agenda item 10, is an update on the duty to cooperate. And Claire will be telling us about that. Hmm?
Your complaint is now at me.
We have a technical problem.
Oh, sorry.
Right. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Right. So the report you have in front of you covers the sections in front of you on the slide. So I've given you a bit of a background, reminding you of the cooperation and alignment strategy that you agreed back in November of last year, and the fact that this is the second report that we've given you on our activities, the last one being in April. So this is just an update on what we've been doing for the last 6 to 8 months. It also refers to the strategic cross-boundary themes that was agreed in that strategy, and these are the issues that we talk to our neighbours about because they are issues that basically cross boundaries. You've then got a very long list of meetings and correspondence with all of those duty to cooperate partners, which I will not go into, but I'm happy to take questions on. And it also including correspondence from us to other local plans, effectively. I think it's the last two items that I'd like to spend a little bit of time on. So that's potential unmet needs letters. Now these letters are appended to the report, and if you recall, we've got two potential ways of working out our housing need for the local plan review. One of those methods, which is the method that we prefer and will be hopefully promoting through our local plan is the bespoke national park method, which follows the principles that we've agreed with all of our national park partners across England and the Broads. And that comes out with the 323 homes a year figure. And then the other approach, which is taking the government's standard method figure, which is done on a local authority basis, and apportioning that between ourselves and our 12 local authorities. That comes out with an eye-watering 1,048 homes a year. So what we've needed to do, although, as I say, we prefer that top figure, which hopefully, subject to your decisions in the new year, we can meet, we obviously can't get anywhere near that second figure. So we've needed to contact all of our authorities, both within the park and on the outskirts of the park, and say, look, if our inspector decides that's the figure we have to use, we can't meet that, can you help? So that's essentially what we've done. We've contacted 26 authorities within that map that I've shown you there, and we are gradually getting responses back in. The other thing that happened, literally as after I'd finalised this report and submitted it, is that we had a written ministerial statement from the Planning Minister on the 27th of November announcing that the duty to cooperate would no longer exist. So this was always going to go for the new set of plans coming in under the new plan making system. What was unexpected was that it's going for plans progressing under the current system. So that includes ours. It also includes those already at examination. Gary's nodding gleefully. So yes, that was a surprise. We weren't expecting it to happen quite like that. I would caution that this is just removing it as a legal test. So what happened before, whilst we had the duty to cooperate, was that you had the first part of the examination which said, have you met all the legal tests for local plans? And that included the duty to cooperate. And then you had the second part of the examination which went into, is your plan sound? And what we were finding over the course of the last 15 years is a lot of plans failing at that first hurdle, usually on housing need and whether unmet needs had been met with partners, without the opportunity to ever get to the second part of the examination and explain why they had actually put in the amount of housing that they had done in their plan. So this is intended to solve that problem. And release some of those local plans that are sort of stuck at that first stage. It does not mean that we can stop cooperating with our partners, because we will still be tested through the soundness of the plan in terms of whether our number in our plan is the right one and whether we've been successful in cooperating with our partners to meet any unmet needs. So it's good news, but not as good as perhaps some people might have thought it was. That's from me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's made some things clearer, hasn't it? Gary.
This is a brilliant news, to be perfectly honest. This is absolutely brilliant news. We've now gone back into examination in Mid-Sussex. We did offer 1,000 units outside our boundary. We fell foul with not telling them where those 1,000 were going to go. Anyway, now that's gone. That is stunningly good news, and I think they should help the park, because you can't fail on duty to cooperate, but you do have to speak to your neighbours to see where, well,
Yeah,
in our case, we have to take their unmet need. You want to ask them to take the unmet need. So, but excellent news, and we will not ever see that lady again in the inspector. We now know who we got, the old one we had before.
Indeed.
In Mid-Sussex.
And you can see that there's an enormous amount of communication been going on between the park and all our coterminous authorities in an attempt to show that we are doing the best we can in terms of duty to cooperate. Have you got your hand up, Helen? Yeah, Paul, you've got your hand up? Paul?
Thank you. I understood, perhaps misunderstood, that this removing the duty to cooperate was connected with the advent of spatial strategies, strategic spatial strategies. So both Sussex and Hampshire and the Isle of Wight would effectively sort this out through the spatial strategy. If that's correct, and in view of the delay in appointment of a creation of mayoral combined authorities, can we get on? Is there cooperation taking place to look at these issues and try to resolve them in anticipation of the mayor's election?
Yes, yeah, I'm sure there is. And Claire, you might want to say something.
Yes, so just to clear that up to start with, it's the mayor's elections that's been delayed, not the combined county authorities. So they're still going ahead. So what we will have is the first generation of the SDS in Sussex and Hampshire being produced by those combined county authorities without a mayor. You're quite right that that's the removal of the duty to cooperate for the next generation of plans was supposed to be because the SDS would take that role of strategic planning. We've obviously got a little bit of a messy period over the next 2 years where they won't be in place to solve that problem, but we won't have the duty to cooperate. And this is why we still have to keep cooperating, even though it's not a legal test.
Mm. Alan.
What worries me, and I've mentioned this point in one or two of our sort of discussion sessions as well before, is that at some point, I note that the duty to cooperate is going and so forth, and I note that while we've been thinking it's there, it's been sensible for us to go along with this exercise of analysing, the amount of housing development which should take place in the national park bit of the districts which we have part of, as it were. But at some point in this exercise, and I'm not quite sure what it is, and I would like a bit more confidence about this, we're going to have to nail our colours to the mast, aren't we? I'd like to know when in the process that's going to be, and make the point, look, housing need is assessed according to districts. I know districts might go out of the window, but according to local authority areas, and whether the new, whatever they're called, unitaries have sub-areas for housing need purposes. I imagine they will, but I don't know. Or not. At some point, we're going to have to say, look, this is the national park. National policy applies to the national park. If X is the need for the totality of Chichester district or whatever follows that, or East Hants district or Winchester district, that's got to be provided somewhere in East Hants. And look, it ain't going to be provided in the national park because we are a national park with the highest level of landscape protection, etc., all that point. At what point in the process do we stop being cuddly and cooperative as well, and working out what the hypothetical amount of housing we might, in a totally hypothetical world,
Okay, Alan. Yeah, we got your point.
Yes.
We got your point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Claire wants to come back on that.
I'm sure she does.
Yes, I'm not sure I've ever been cuddly, but hey. So we've got a report coming to you in February with the Regulation 19 plan. That is where we will set out, that the 323 number is what we think our housing need is, and probably more importantly, what we think we can provide. So our arguments around what you've just set out in terms of the importance of our national park status will be around what is reasonable for us to provide, regardless of what the housing need is, bluntly.
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, can I just add to that? And it's in your letters, in your bundle of papers here, in terms of the letters we've sent to the authorities. In effect, Alan, we've already started that process of saying we think we are different. We work things out differently. Our bespoke methodology has come out with this much lower figure. We're just making you aware, and in due course we'll then talk about what needs to be picked up or not.
At some point we'll need to be strong on that.
That'll be February, March.
That'll be February.
Yeah.
That'll be February. Andrew.
Yes, thanks. Noting that para 3.2 says the following positive joint working has resulted, I was going to the 6th bullet point, which refers to gypsy and travellers, and I was wondering what's happened as a result of a joint call July to October 2025. I think I might know the answer, but it's useful to air the question.
Claire.
Oh.
So we have had some response to that call for sites, so we will be introducing some proposed allocations to you in February. Or at the workshop before February, obviously, but yeah, for your formal consideration in February.
Okay. Yes, come back.
Saying back. Can I expand on that to the extent of saying there are, of course, other parts of the national park with that same requirement, and will there some positive results as a result of asking the other parts of the park whether there are site allocations?
Yes, so the call for sites was park-wide. It wasn't just limited to East Sussex. So the sites we'll be bringing to you are across the national park.
Thank you. Any more? Robert.
Claire, I'm delighted to see the letters in the Appendix 1. And it's a request that when we get the letters back again, can you put those in a similar appendix at either the January or the February meeting, just to see what the different authorities have said back to us? Because I'm guessing they're not going to be, well done, that's fantastic news, we're really happy for you. So I'd very much like to see in public the responses of all of them, including all the authorities we represent, about what they've actually said to us. And this is a public letter, this is in the public domain. Let's have the responses in the public domain that we publish, even if those sending it don't.
Fair comment. Yeah. Can we do that? Right, thank you. Any more? In which case, we are required to note the contents of this report. Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes the agenda. Now, just before you all disappear, you received a note from... Sorry.